Good evening. Welcome to the City of Warrenville Public Works and Infrastructure Committee of the Whole regular meeting. It is Monday evening, February 12th, 2018. Can we have clerk a roll call, please?
Alderman Ashour.
Here.
Alderman Berry.
Here.
Alderman Bevere is excused this evening. Alderman Davalos.
Here.
Alderman Goodman.
Here.
Alderman Hoffman.
Here.
Alderman Widener.
Here.
Alderman Wilson.
Here.
Thank you. If you'd please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The next item is usually citizens' comments. If anyone has any comments, if they'd like to come up at this time, or what you can do is when we bring the item forward, you can come up at that time and make comments at the time that we do the presentation. I see no one at the moment. Okay. Officials and staff comments. Mayor?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just one thing tonight, I want to talk a little bit about snow removal. There have been some questions lately of how we accomplish that and what exactly we do. So let me read this statement, and hopefully it will be clear going forward where we're at right now. So to begin, I'd like to commend the Public Works crews for doing a fantastic job working virtually nonstop for many hours over the past week, actually 9 days. We had 9 consecutive days of snow to keep our roadways clear of snow and ice and making them safe to travel on, and that's always our first priority. The city's first and foremost priority for snow and ice removal are the following, listed in order. So here we go. First, clear the main roadways through streets. Second, clear the side streets. Third, clear the cul-de-sacs. I know that's how it works because I'm on a cul-de-sac and I'm always last. 4, clear school crossings near the schools, also very, very important. Recreational paths. The paths are not typically cleared of snow in Warrenville. Our town is well known for the abundance of trails and walking paths, and while we'd love to be able to keep these areas open, the city does not currently have the resources to do so. The Public Works Department has been doing snow removal on specific paths this past week in order to assess the amount of time and resources needed. They are not intending to make this a standard of service at this time, but are assessing the costs and benefits of such a service in terms of the capacity of city personnel, equipment, and finances, whether or not this might be able to be undertaken in the future. The city continually looks for ways to improve its services, including snow removal. As far as sidewalks go, the city has many miles of sidewalks and does not have the resources to clear snow from sidewalks. The exception is the sidewalks around city buildings. The city asks that the adjacent property owners remove snow from the sidewalks near their homes and businesses. A lot of private citizens pitch in during times like these to help keep sidewalks clear of snow and ice for the children, elderly residents, and all pedestrians. I hope we can continue with that same spirit, and we'll try to get this statement also up on our Facebook page and other places so people get to see it. So thank you for your consideration and your patience, and thanks again to our Public Works folks who did, by all assessments, a terrific job yet again.
Thank you. City Administrator?
I have nothing to add tonight, thank you.
Okay. Alderman? Okay, I see nothing. Any other comments from clerk? Staff? Okay, good. The next item is the business of the meeting. And number 1 is consideration of Wheaton Warrenville South High School Choral Classic advertisement in the amount of $500. That will be presented by Christina White.
Thank you. For several years, the city has.
I don't think that, is that working?
Okay. It's on. Can you hear me now? Okay. Thank
I
you.
don't think so.
For several years, the city has helped to sponsor this event through advertisement. The Wheaton Warrenville South High School has presented this choral classic. This will be the 11th year. Included in the backup material with the packet is a copy of last year's advertisement where the city highlights things to do and places to go in town as part of this advertisement booklet for the program of the event. This evening, I have Mike and Diane here from the Booster Club, and they can talk a little bit more about the program and answer any questions that the council has.
Hi, thank you for having us today, and thank you very much for your past support. You've got a really busy agenda, so I'll keep it brief. The Choral Classic in its 11th year. It's over 2 days, Friday and a full day Saturday. Event will have over just about 30 performances by high school and middle school kids at the Choral Classic. The funds that we raise at the Choral Classic help provide music instruction and equipment and need-based financial aid to allow the kids to be able to perform who are on a need-based need. So really, I didn't have a whole lot to be able to give you other than some brief background on the Choral Classic and what we use the funds for. Really, it's all for the education of the kids and financial need. Any questions?
Questions? Alderman Goodman?
I have one for staff. Is the attachment here from last year's ad, or is this the updated one that we're going to send? Because I see restaurants on here that are closed.
That's from last year.
Okay.
Yeah, so there will be an updated ad for this year that will add all the new restaurants and remove the ones that are no longer here.
Okay, yeah, we definitely want to advertise Chewy's and not specialties, for example.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
And put up our new logo, correct?
Yes.
Very good. Alderman Widener?
Yeah, we've been doing this for a number of years, and we're, I guess, usually very pleased to support the Wheaton Warrenville South High School Choral Classic. And with that, I make a motion the City Council approve a $500 advertisement for the 11th annual Wheaton Warrenville South High School Choral Classic.
Second.
We have a motion by Alderman Widener and a second by Alderman Davalos. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion passes.
Thank you very much for your support.
Thank you. Okay, number two, this is the FY 2019 budget presentation for the Public Works Department. We have Deputy Public Works Director Phil Kugler.
Oh, good. That's Christine's going to call my presentation here. I've changed my presentation format this year to kind of mimic the work plans that are for the citywide work plan as well as the individual department work plan. So you're going to see, instead of projects grouped by like design, engineering, or construction, they're going to be grouped by Tier 1 initiatives, Tier 2 initiatives, and Tier 3 initiatives. So I'm going to jump right into my first slide here, which is the Tier 1 initiatives for the current fiscal year 2018. We had the road program, a couple of sewer and water extension projects, and staffing items. The road program is something we do every year. It's part of the capital maintenance and replacement program where our roads are on a 15-year cycle for resurfacing. In the fiscal year 2018, we had the 2017 road program construction project, and currently we're putting together bid documents for the 2018 project. And actually, Senior Civil Engineer Hawkins can have a request later on this agenda to go out to bid for that project before the budget's formally approved in April. There was a city sewer water extension project last year in Glen Drive North, Williams Road, and Calumet Avenue. This is about a $2 million project that was constructed by Pertano Construction. There was a Forest Preserve District water main extension on Williams Road and on Mack Road as part of their fleet maintenance facility construction up on Mack Road. This lengthy water main extension actually closed a loop in the city's water main between two dead ends, which will give better circulation to that area of town for water quality. And the projects that were associated with the Amazon facility, the Duke Parkway construction, intersection improvements, and the Barclay Road connector also involved the sewer and water extension project as well. And finally, for the staffing, last year at this time we requested, or around this time we requested permission to go out and recruit early for the Public Works Management Analyst position. Christina's doing something similar tonight for, I think it's agenda item number 4 or 5, for a couple of positions, and that helped us get Justin on board to be able to start in early June this year by going out early and be able to recruit early. So Tier 2 initiatives, and I do want to point out that I'm not going through every project that's in my work plan. So that for fiscal year 18, there are going to be some Tier 1, 2, and 3 initiatives that aren't part of my presentation here, and same thing with fiscal year 19. I'm trying to hit some of the high points to give you an idea of what we really focus on as Tier 1 initiatives or high priority, Tier 2 that are important as well, and then Tier 3 that are items that are desirable projects, but we don't really expect to make progress on in the given fiscal year. We had a couple of design projects that had surface transportation program funding that were included in the Tier 2 initiatives for fiscal year 18. The Mack Road Trail Project, which is to build a trail on the north side of Mack Road between Route 59 across the river to the McKee Marsh Forest Preserve, which includes some signal improvements at Route 59 and Mack Road to allow for pedestrians to safely cross that intersection. As part of that phase 1 engineering, preliminary engineering for that project this year, we identified that the Mack Road Bridge is actually in need of replacement. So that's going to lengthen that phase 1 process into next fiscal year, because we've currently applied for funds. We have a funding request into IDOT, and there's going to have to be an amendment to that contract to incorporate the phase 1 bridge design engineering into the PATH project. There's a Deal Road Turn Lane Improvement Project that also has surface transportation program funds. We're at the end of phase 1 engineering for that, and we anticipate approval in the coming months for the phase 1 project report, and would be able to work on phase 2 engineering for that. That involves a left turn lane into the Target's parking lot from Deal Road that should alleviate some of the congestion at the intersection of Davis Parkway and Deal Road that is especially experienced at lunchtime and in rush hour. There's also, as part of that project, lengthening the dual left turn lanes on Deal Road turning to Winfield Road to provide a little more capacity for those turn lanes as well. We have the private drainage systems policy, which there's a decision package in the current fiscal year budget to construct the Harvest Court and Lakeview Court rear yard drainage project, which we were able to do successfully this year. As tied into that was the development of a policy and a program, as well as an application process for future private drainage assistance. And we presented the application process in December. Right now, Justin's working with the city attorney to finalize some of the supporting documents and the access agreements and that, so we can roll that application process out soon. It's taking a little longer than I had hoped, but we are working on that, and we anticipate soon being able to do that. We've had a couple of residents actually reach out to the city asking when that application will be ready, so we will contact them. We've got their information. We'll get the word out through maybe Mayor Brummel making an announcement at a future meeting, Channel 10, Facebook, and on the website, so we can get the word out to people. Finally, there are a couple of public works improvements at the garage that were contemplated as part of the current fiscal year budget. We're changing over the cyber key system that's over there for the locks right now to a keypad entry system similar to what's here at City Hall and also over at the police department, so we're consistent. We'll all be on the same system. So John can come over and meet with me, and he can punch in his code to get in instead of needing to find an open door, call me to let him in or whatever. And then the other project that was contemplated, and there was a structural shelving project, which we haven't made as much progress on that as I'd hoped. We are still working on to put together bid documents on that. I don't anticipate spending any money or awarding a contract this current fiscal year, but that'll be pushed to next fiscal year, because we are still working toward that. We're just not as far along as I'd hoped we'd be. The Tier 3 initiatives, and these are, again, desirable initiatives, but ones that we did not anticipate making any progress on this year just due to the heavier workload with the Tier 1 and Tier 2 initiatives. And then, as you'll see in my next slide, with some of the challenges we face this year that we did not expect to encounter. But there's an emergency management agency office conversion, evaluation of potential solar opportunities, Point Oak Drive dedication and engineering, and Riggy and Barkley dedication and engineering as well. That brings me to our challenges for this year. There were some fires that need to be put out occasionally, and this happens every year. They just vary. They're not expected. They require a lot of attention immediately, and these fires tended to actually require time for multiple departments as well. And so one of them involved sanitary sewer flows. Naperville grew a little bit concerned when they saw the amount of change was proposed in the Southwest District, so we had to work closely with them to develop a full build-out, estimated full build-out of the city with the new redevelopment areas and that kind of stuff. Ron and Christine in community development did a heck of a lot of work putting together a huge spreadsheet of kind of all potential build-outs, annexations, no matter how likely or unlikely, and put that together for Naperville. We worked back and forth with them to review those documents, and that's actually the kind of guiding or basis for the memorandum of understanding that staff put together with them that's going to be presented later this evening. And involved with that or tied into that is the infiltration and inflow, or the I&I issues that we have, and all sanitary sewer systems have them. I think we've touched on it briefly in a couple of meetings before. Engineering Enterprises is here tonight. They're going to be providing a detailed presentation on that, the I&I reduction program they're helping us out with right now, so I'm not going to dwell on that item. Home Avenue, there were a couple of residents that had a failing water well, and they were unincorporated, so they had to annex the city to connect to our system. To help expedite that process, Public Works staff worked with Christine to design the water main, submit for an IEPA permit. We constructed the project actually concurrently while they were going through the annexation process with community development to annex the city, and we were able to get them hooked up for winter. Mack Road Bridge replacement I referred to earlier, that's something we didn't expect to have to incorporate into the trail improvement project, but that is something that came up, and we are working through the process to obtain funding for that and incorporate that into the project. And finally, there's some implementation issues with our new water meter transmitting units. From the Public Works side of things, they work great. They're exactly what we expected in terms of ease of installation. They take about half the time to install and get up and running. The software interface that we have to be able to look at reads and things like that is really slick. Our utility division really likes it. It's not going as smoothly on the finance department side, so this is really causing well, it saved us time. It's causing them to spend more time with utility billing. The city's utility billing software and the vendor's software for the water meter transmitting units isn't communicating as well as we'd hope, so we're trying to work through that process, and that's causing a little bit of a delay in the rollout of installing more of these. We've got a 5-year change-out program that we've anticipated as part of this, and we've put it on hold until we get this straightened out so we don't make things worse for utility billing. But it seems like we're making progress on that in my conversations with Kevin, and I think I'm optimistic that we'll soon have them communicating and working properly. I'm going to move on to fiscal year 19 and the Tier 1 initiatives. You're going to hear through everybody's budget presentation, ERP is going to be mentioned as a high priority item. While finance is leading that charge, it's going to involve all departments. It involves community development, police department, public works to a lesser degree than finance and administration, but it involves all of us. And community development actually has a module that they're working on for building permit software as part of that. So it's going to be a 12 to 18 month implementation that's going to involve, from public works standpoint, mine and Justin's time. But will reach across all departments. The road program, again, for next fiscal year is going to be the 2018 road construction and then the development of the 2019 bid documents. And then we've got a number of initiatives that support economic development in the city. One of them is going to be, there's actually 2 decision packages in this year's budget that are being pushed to next year because of working through the issues we worked through with Naperville. That's a sewer extension project as well as a sewer upsizing project. The sewer extension project, we just submitted this last week for an IEPA permit. We had Naperville and the city both signed off on it and submitted it. So in the next couple of months, we should be getting feedback from them and hopefully an approval on that, and we can go out to bid. We're working on finalizing the bid documents right now to go out to bid on that project with construction to occur this summer. The upsizing project actually is an item on tonight's agenda for an engineering design contract for that project. And we're going to follow that as closely as we can with the construction of the extension. But both of these projects will support the Southwest District and provide enough sanitary sewer capacity to be able to support like the Lexington Trace development that's proposed, or the Thornton's gas station that's proposed, or even the tentative like MI Homes project that's proposed as well. As part of the Southwest District, we've had actually Engineering Enterprises evaluate our water system. They've modeled it. There's going to be a new elevated water storage tank as well as a well and iron filtration that's required in the Southwest District. We have a decision package in the fiscal year 19 budget for the design of this well and water storage tank. And that we'll analyze, they'll probably drill a couple of test wells at sites that we're going to consider for location of this to make sure we actually have a viable well location there. There's as you'll see in the MOU later in this evening's agenda, there's coordination with Naperville on an interceptor sewer analysis. And that's basically taking the Cantera analysis that was done when Cantera was developed. I think the report was dated 1990 or 1991, and updating that with current flows, current build-out projections for both Warrenville and the part of Naperville that's tributary to that section of sanitary sewer. We're going to work through the scope of that work with Naperville and develop what that is, and then move forward with getting an engineering proposal for that work and bringing that to council sometime during fiscal year 19. And finally, the I&I reduction program, we're going to have the first phase of that I&I reduction program, which is going to be a sanitary sewer flow analysis or monitoring and analysis is done as part of this year. It'll be done probably in May and June when we're looking at wet weather flows. Moving on to the Tier 2 initiatives, we're going to continue with the Mac Road project to hopefully work through Phase 1 engineering, complete that in fiscal year 19. Deal Road will move into Phase 2 final engineering, which is working toward development of bid documents and working toward a bid opening with IDOT on that project. So we could potentially be under construction on that project in fiscal year 2020 and calendar year 2019. Private Property Drainage Systems Administration, we're going to be accepting applications, ranking those projects, and then taking the top ranked project and working with those property owners and a design engineer to figure out a solution that'll help take care of those private property drainage issues. And there's money in this year's budget for a project. I think we had budgeted about $40,000 based on council feedback. And there's an elected official budget request for fiscal year 19 budget that was for the development of a complete streets policy. And staff feels this is important because this will help lay the foundation for future, how we look at future path projects or potential sidewalk projects. The complete streets policy is going to be something that we envision. We're going to hire a consultant for probably in the neighborhood of $15,000 to help guide the city through the process to figure out a complete streets policy that works for Warrenville and fits for Warrenville. So it's not going to be the same as like a City of Chicago complete streets policy or what IDOT's complete streets policy might be. It's going to be something that's tailored to here and what the city council and residents here want, and kind of figure out a level of spending that annual spending that would help support that as well. So that will help lay the foundation for how we look at future projects and incorporating them into our capital improvements plan, and also any future update of the bikeway implementation plan, for instance, or a sidewalk program, and it'd be the foundation for that moving forward. And again, we've got some Tier 3 initiatives that are good projects, desirable projects, but when you look at the amount of work we have, especially if you start looking at the stuff that's tied to economic development, and that it's really important to get done for that. These projects don't quite rise to the same priority as those other projects do. So these are three projects that we don't anticipate advancing to a significant degree this fiscal year, and as such, we're also not proposing any money in the budget for those items. Obviously, there's an item late in the agenda tonight for the citywide work plan. There's going to be continued discussion on that, I think, through March 5th to get council feedback and as a whole consensus as to whether or not you agree with our priorities or not, and if there's things that need to move up or down. But right now, this is consistent. I've made my department work plan consistent with the citywide work plan, and have fed into and given input into that as well. So at this point, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. That's quite a ambitious program. And it's all good because it's infrastructure for our city, and it's great for people that want to come and move here, and things will be ready for them, and this is what we need. So, questions? Alderman Widener?
Yeah, thanks for the report. I have a question about the Private Drainage Assistance Administration. It's a FY Tier 2 initiative, and we've kind of instigated that program, correct? And I just wonder how it's advertised and whether you've been getting any applications or any soundings from the community as far as whether there's a lot of additional drainage assistance that's going to be required, or whether or not maybe the one we took care of is the all that we're going to see for a while.
Well, so far, we've just in I think the last month, we've received 2 phone calls from residents looking at wondering where that application process is. So we're wrapping up those documents to get distributed, and we want to make an announcements at council meeting, get it online on the website, get it on Facebook. We're going to certainly respond to those 2 when the application's ready and provide it to them. But at this point, it's just 2 people that have currently asked for it. I would imagine it'd be interesting to see how many people respond once we actually get the word out to people that it's ready. We're getting close, though. It's city attorneys putting the final touches on some of the supporting access agreements and easement agreements that are required for that.
Has city staff identified any additional areas of private property that would need this kind of assistance?
We haven't looked for them. I'm aware of past requests of people that may or may not fit into the program, and there's one off of Williams Road that's a large depressional area that I'm not sure quite meets the criteria for this, because it would probably be a really expensive project, far more than what we'd have budgeted to take care of, and it's also more complicated. Even in engineering might be a pretty costly project just to design it. But we haven't gone out and sought out any or looked for projects Let them, the idea is, I think, to let them come to us. And as obviously, as elected officials, you have a lot of contact with the residents, and if they come to you with requests or questions, you can always direct them to us at Public Works to provide that application and talk with them about it.
Okay, thank you very much.
Alderman Davalos?
Thank you. On the Tier 3 initiative with the solar study, more specifically the solar trial project that we'll be discussing, I guess, in the 2019 decision packages. So depending on how that discussion goes, this may not move off of Tier 3, but it would be in the queue to be taken care of if the decision package went through, right?
Correct.
I mean, how do you look at that?
I would anticipate that it stays in the Tier 3 area, that we would most likely wouldn't be getting to it this year, but you're right, it would be in the kind of in the queue per se. As some of those other projects that rank higher get completed, maybe it falls in the following year, it climbs up the list a little bit and it becomes a higher priority. And a lot of this staff has given our recommendations for this, for our individual department work programs, but also the citywide work program, but ultimately it's City Council that's got to give us direction on that.
Right, and would the availability of funding change any of that? It's more manpower issue, kind of what your department already has on their plate. But
Correct.
I guess we just have to see if funding came along with that.
I don't think
That wasn't city funding.
Yeah, unless the funding was tied to some particular time frame where we had to absolutely get it done in a year or something. That's what has driven some of the Tier 1 projects, is we either have agreements with developers that require us to get something done by a certain date, or we have a funding source, grant funding from federal government that would expire after a certain amount of time, so we need it. That's driving some of the ranking and the priorities on those projects.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
All right, next we have the FY 2019 budget presentation for the Administration Department, and Christina White, the Assistant City Administrator, will do the presenting.
Okay, we need a break for transition here. Thank you. Following Public Works is going to be a little bit challenging because obviously they have a lot of exciting projects coming up and that they've accomplished over the last year. So tonight I'm going to just go over a brief overview of the fiscal year 18 administration accomplishments, some of the challenges we faced, and we'll talk a little bit about the objectives going into fiscal year 19. As Phil mentioned, and that's going to carry over into my presentation, this is not intended to be an all-inclusive list of everything that we do or everything that's in all of the work plans, but more just a highlight of some of the major accomplishments. So in fiscal year 18, we upgraded city technology, we hired 8 new employees, we worked through and assisted with the other departments in selecting an ERP system, which you've heard quite a bit about. Participated in the city branding initiative, which I've highlighted at the bottom of all of my slides here. As part of the branding initiative was the logo, and celebrated the 50th anniversary of incorporation. So the first 2 items on the list are regular daily tasks of the administration department, which is IT and HR. But why I included them in the list of accomplishments is I think it's important to point out and highlight that IT continues to be a main focus for our department. We are constantly struggling and trying to keep up with the ever-changing and ever-moving technology. We have done some things to upgrade the city's Wi-Fi and some of the network equipment. We continue to try to provide resources to all of the other departments so that they can do their jobs more efficiently. One of those examples is providing some tablets to Public Works so the people out in the field can answer inquiries and respond to issues that come up in a quicker, more efficient way. But all of that requires, obviously, continued support from our IT consultants. The hiring of 8 new employees is also worth mentioning because on average the last 5 years we've been hiring about 10 new people per year. This year that number of 8 includes 7 current positions that we were filling and 1 new position that was added. The enterprise resource planning selection process has been a 2-year endeavor of coming up with a long list of requirements for the system and what was needed to accomplish the city standpoint and from staff standpoint, what were the requirements that needed to be met in order for us to select a system that would help us function and become more efficient. Administration was heavily involved in a lot of those meetings and as part of the steering committee and continues to be involved with the project. Again, the branding initiative was an endeavor that was started with community development. Administration staff participated heavily in that committee to select the final logo that was adopted by the city council and also the general brand of Warrenville naturally. And then finally, the city's 50th anniversary of incorporation was in calendar year 2017, and because administration doesn't often get opportunities to have photos, I decided to take this opportunity to have an entire slide of photos of the 50th anniversary. So one of the things that we started out the year with was the 50th anniversary commemorative logo at the top of the screen, and these are just some images of the different events. We had 3 different events, starting off with a kickoff event in May, and then we were able to partner with the Historical Society, and the Park District was nice enough to allow us to work with them at Art on the Prairie to unveil the time capsule that was buried in the gazebo. And then in December, we actually buried a new time capsule that'll be opened in 2067, which will be exciting for those folks to see what we put in there. Additional fiscal year 18 accomplishments. We engaged a new corporate attorney. It's pretty self-explanatory. We were on a committee with some different senior level staff and a couple of elected officials as part of that endeavor. We've improved our communication and outreach. So right now we're limited on social media to just Facebook. We post all of our videos to YouTube, but we have seen an increase in the engagement. The Facebook analytics tell us we've reached about 10,000 people with Facebook posts over calendar year 2017, which is not so bad considering it hasn't been one of our main efforts, but we continue to try to improve on that. And then the compensation study phase 4 is an ongoing effort that we anticipate having completed before the end of this year. Unfortunately, that's been delayed a little bit by transition internally in the department and with our consultants at Sikich. The administration department also supports the economic development representatives and meets with the developers that Administrator Coakley and Ron spend a lot of time working together on all of our economic development initiatives. And most recently, we created the first citywide work plan to try to give an overview of all of the large multi-departmental projects. And we'll talk more about that later on this evening. Some ongoing challenges for administration, again, has been internal department staff changes. We are a department of 4, or were a department of 4 full-time people in the beginning of fiscal year 2018. We had a longtime employee retire, which was fantastic for that employee, not so fantastic for administration when you lose 25% of the workforce. But that has presented some challenges. We recollected pretty quickly and were able to make some recommendations to the council to outsource our IT, which has been a successful initiative. But there are other things that are still a challenge in terms of keeping up with the day-to-day routine work and also with managing the long list of projects and initiatives. And again, we'll be talking about that as the items on the agenda, next item on the agenda. Recruiting and hiring has also been a challenge for us, especially with part-time. We have struggled, and I think this is indicative of the economy that we're in, but part-time staff has been difficult to come by. We've had several part-time positions that have remained open despite several recruiting attempts. Some of those are part-time police officers, a crossing guard position, the lead van driver position is still not filled. So it's taken a lot longer in terms of staff time to accomplish those recruitments than you would anticipate would be standard for a part-time position. And then finally, the growing demands for technology and services, that's going to continue to be a challenge for us because it doesn't stop. It just keeps going forward. And internally, from an efficiency standpoint, all of our departments are looking at ways to improve the way that they deliver services to the community and to the residents, and a lot of that is mobility and having the access to the information quickly, being able to turn it around quickly, and that all requires technology, software, hardware, tablets, phones, whatever it may be. So we are struggling a little bit to keep up with all of those demands, and I don't anticipate that that's going to slow down. Fiscal year 19 objectives. The replacement of the city phone system is going to be carried over into fiscal year 19. We started out the year, staff with a committee of people looking at the different phone needs. It took us a little bit longer to come to terms and figure out what the city needed moving forward. That we're finally past that point. We've done some demonstrations, and now I think we're ready to move forward with actually sending out the RFP and collecting the responses and making a selection. So that will be coming. We anticipate likely it will be done mostly by the end of this fiscal year, but the actual installation may go into early fiscal year 19. We're going to continue to work through the ERP system. So we've gone through a selection process. It's in attorney review right now. The implementation is set to start pretty much at the beginning of fiscal year 19, and that will be a 14-month endeavor. I don't want to steal Finance Director Dahlstrand's thunder, as he'll be probably highlighting that in his budget presentation, but that will be a very, very large undertaking for most of the city departments, mostly finance and HR and community development with, like Phil said, some public works and police as well. With the ERP implementation is going to come the need to develop or update policies related to the ERP. The way that we do business regularly and have done business and tried to use the resources we have, that's going to need to change when we change our resources. So the ERP is going to change the way that we handle some of our internal processes, and that will facilitate the need to have additional policies or update current policies to meet those changes. I skipped one. Assist community development with the TIF agreement. So as Ron highlighted in his presentation, there are going to be some redevelopment agreements and TIF assistance agreements that community development is going to be working on, and John is going to be heavily involved with them to get that completed. Assisting the police department with the DuPage Justice Information System. That is going to require some IT support. You've heard mention of that throughout the last year. That is going to continue into this year, and it is anticipated that that will be implemented and completed this year. Recruiting and onboarding 2 new positions, again, in the agenda this evening is a request for that. So if we begin early recruitment, most of the recruitment part of that work will occur in fiscal year 18. However, it will continue into fiscal year 19 until the 2 positions are filled, assuming they're approved. One of the other decision packages that will be in the budget paperwork for you is the Ride DuPage pilot program, which we discussed at a meeting last year. We are looking to run a pilot program concurrently with the ACORN program, and then assess and evaluate whether or not the city should continue the ACORN program or whether it makes sense to look at a different option with Ride DuPage. The branding marketing plan that was approved is going to need to be implemented, so staff has also included a decision package to look at a marketing program for social media. Also, some of the other costs included are photography. Part of the marketing brand was to highlight all of the natural elements of Warrenville. It's important to do that through pictures of the different seasons that we can then use on promotional materials, either in print or on the website or the Facebook page. And also with that would be purchasing some promotional materials that we can hand out at the different events. And then we are going to continue to evaluate building security needs for City Hall and Public Works. Police Department is pretty well set given the nature of their business, but this is not to say that we don't have security measures in place, but it's a continuous review and improvement of those security needs. Also this year, we need to update the quiet zone. That is every 3 years update that will involve multiple departments. It is expiring in October, so we have to work to get that done. Assisting community development again with the Citgo acquisition. This is another area with economic development where City Administrator Coakley is heavily involved. And assisting with the 2020 census preparation, which is underway. And finally, again, updating technology policies as we continue to grow in our technology. We have to reevaluate the usage and who gets what kind of technology and equipment and software and how that purchasing occurs and the approval processes and what that all means. So that is something that we are going to have to continue to review and look at. That was a lot of information I just threw at you, so I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. That was a great presentation. Questions from the alderman? Mayor? Mayor Brummel?
Christina, I suspect there are a lot of folks out there that are scratching their heads saying, what's an ERP? Could you take just a moment and explain exactly what that means, why we're doing it, and what benefits we anticipate from it?
Absolutely. So ERP is an enterprise resource planning system. The best way I can describe it is it's basically operational software. So it will make more efficient our accounting, our finance, our human resources, our work order system, our inventorying, everything that the city does from a day-to-day operational need will be handled by this software. And it makes it a more efficient process. It allows the city departments to interrelate. So if something is entered or updated in public works or in finance, all of that information is also readily available then for community development, for human resources. So it will basically eliminate the need to duplicate efforts and add a higher level of efficiency to all of our day-to-day operations. So it's an expensive project, it is a time-consuming project to implement, but staff feels very strongly that it's worthwhile and will make us better long-term to have it in place. Currently, our system is, it meets the very minimum needs, but it is no longer going to be supported long-term, and therefore it's not being updated. And that creates issues when we have, when we run into problems with the current system. It's very limited in what it can do. It's basically financial and accounting software with very light payroll, but it doesn't offer that efficiency across all city departments and allows us to get a whole picture of what's going on by looking at the different components of it.
So it's basically a complete overhaul of how we do business.
Yes, yes.
For the better.
For the better.
Thank you, Christina.
You're welcome.
Alderman Goodman?
Yes, I'm strongly in favor of improving our services with efficiency. That sounds like a very good summary of what's going on. Thank you for that. So back to the bit about problems hiring part-time staff. We haven't had problems hiring full-time staff. Is it the nature of the part-time positions? I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
My opinion is that it is the nature of the part-time positions. It seems like with the improvement of the economy that full-time positions have not been an issue to fill. They still take a long period of time from start to finish before you get somebody actually in the door. But we just have not seen the level of response when it comes to the part-time positions. We get few applicants. And as we get through the process and go through interviews and try to move the process forward, they fall off. Some of the candidates decide they no longer want the position, or they get hired elsewhere, or something changes. And so we've just really struggled to find qualified candidates to stick through the process to hire.
I mean, I do find that surprising. Anecdotally, you hear about, more people who want work-life balance and would like part-time positions or want to be able to balance the demands of a family with also still making some money on the side. You hear this anecdotally, but if it's not happening in practice, then that counters those stereotypes, I suppose.
Right, and that has not been the experience we've had over the last year. As I said, we've had 2 part-time police officer positions and a part-time crossing guard position that have been open well over a year. We've posted, I believe, both 2 or 3 times now. We've gotten applications, but not enough to find the right candidate to fill the positions for the city. So it has been a challenge.
Okay, and also the lead van driver position, I understand, although I had heard at one point through the grapevine that there was a candidate for that, but I guess
we do have a candidate, but the position is yet to be filled. So we're still going through the background and recruitment process at this point.
Okay, so just to tie that together with something that was later in the presentation, you talked about the Ride DuPage pilot program. So would that be feasible without a lead van driver? Would there be coordination there of the management level stuff that would be handled by a lead van driver?
Well, there would be some coordination with our current program and the oversight of the current program by the lead van driver. So not having that position has created some issues for us. And Public Works right now has had management analyst Miller filling in as much as possible to cover some of those duties. With the Ride DuPage program, they are able to provide reporting and information that we don't normally have at the city. So there wouldn't be as much of a level of reporting or management needed on our end as much as it would be reviewing the information that's being provided to us and then comparing that information to what we have for the ACORN program to determine what the differences and similarities are and how the two programs basically relate.
Right, and what level of service we're able to offer.
Correct, right.
And to what extent there's interest in what it ends up being utilized.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, so, but those are the sorts of decisions that are maybe made at a higher level of staff to make that kind of differentiation. Okay. So the Quiet Zone update, because that expires in October, is this something you're already having to work on now? You said it involves multiple departments. Who else is involved?
It is likely at this point that at a minimum we would likely need some help from Public Works and possibly the police department. So the update is mandatory every 3 years. There's an inventory that needs to be done of the different, sorry, I lost my chain of thought. The different crossings that we have in town. There's a form that needs to be filled out in an inventory, and then there's a need to do some traffic counting. So in the past, it's involved some assistance from the city of Naperville. There's some county involvement, and then internally, administration is the lead on the project or on the update with assistance from Public Works and Police Department to complete those efforts. So we haven't started yet, but that's something that we're going to have to be starting pretty soon.
Yeah, because October,
It comes
before
quickly.
you know it, I know we're still talking about next year's budget and this discussion, but October is going to be relatively early in the fiscal year.
Yes, yep.
Okay, and assisting with the census preparation likewise requires a great deal of lead time.
Right.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Okay. Thank you, Christina, for your presentation. Okay. Number 4, consideration of staff request for early recruitment of administrative services coordinator and staff engineer. And again, we go to Assistant City Administrator Christina White.
Amazing how quickly I got over here. Okay, in the backup materials, there is a memo from me and some draft job postings for the 2 positions. Can you hear me okay? Is this okay? So the first position, the Administrative Services Coordinator position, this is technically a reauthorization of a position that we had going into fiscal year 18. Staff had come to you, again, with the retirement of the previous Administrative Services Coordinator, and we had asked to outsource all of our IT to our consultants at that time, and then replace the Administrative Services Coordinator with a part-time Human Resources Coordinator. We did go out and attempt to recruit a part-time Human Resources Coordinator, and that was not successful. So over the last 7 months, staff has had an opportunity to review not only how the outsourced IT has been working, but also the other parts of the Administrative Services Coordinator position that were left and redistributed to current administration staff. And we've come to the conclusion that there is enough work to justify that 4th full-time person. There is a lot that occurs, as I mentioned, with the recruiting. We've had on average 10 new hires a year. Each new hire or new recruitment requires anywhere from 3 to 6 months between start to finish of conducting recruitments in the interview process and then onboarding those new hires into their positions. That position was also responsible for some risk management and liability and workers' compensation claim management. The new position would not have any IT. That is still going to be completely outsourced to our consultant. So that would be a change from the previous position. But instead of some of that work, they would have a heavier focus on human resources, risk management, and some communications and assisting us with posting information to the website, drafting and creating postings for social media, and trying to keep things updated. Now that won't be a huge part of the position. It is mostly going to be human resources and risk management, but there will be some light communications as part of that. And then secondly, the civil engineer, that is a new position that's being requested by the Community Development Department. They have identified a large number of projects and anticipate that there's going to continue to be a large number of projects requiring engineering review over the next at least 5 years, more so than what can be overseen by one staff engineer, which we currently have one senior civil engineer to handle both all of the community development plan reviews and projects, as well as all of the projects at Public Works that require engineering review. And because they don't foresee or anticipate that that is going to change anytime in the near future, it's only going to increase, they are asking for a full-time civil engineer position. So the reason this evening that we're asking to early recruit those positions is very similar to the reason we asked to early recruit the management analyst position at Public Works last year. Recruiting takes a lot of time, and if we don't start until after the budget is approved, the likelihood of having anybody in either one of those positions before probably August or September is slim to none. The other benefit to recruiting early is that you catch students that are finishing and wrapping up their degrees in the spring and are looking for positions. So there's an advantage to doing it at that time versus waiting until May and June to start recruiting. With the ERP project starting early in May, or possibly in April, depending on attorney review and approval from the council, that is going to, again, take a significant amount of time from staff in the different departments, so that to then also try to recruit and interview and coordinate schedules while that's all going on is going to make it that much more challenging to get that accomplished. So we are asking at this point to begin recruiting now. We would not approve, or we would not, make an offer of employment until the city council has had an opportunity to review the budget, until we've had the budget workshop and the budget is actually approved. At this point, we would just start recruiting efforts and no position would be offered until we get final approval. So if the council decided after the budget workshop that they did not want to move forward with either position or both positions, we would stop efforts at that point and not move forward. And we'll take any questions, and Community Development and Economic Development Director Menser is also here to answer questions about the civil engineer position.
Questions? Oh. City Administrator Coakley.
I would add one thing to that presentation, that we need to know at this point if the council has enough interest to tell us to go ahead. If you don't, then let's not spend the $3,000. We'll have to readjust some other priorities, because those two positions are very vital to the list of priorities and projects that we have submitted. But if the council, for example, was just not interested at all in having these positions, and you know that now, please don't be shy about telling us that, and we will stop those efforts and do with what we have and figure out how to make it work. We don't want to commit that time and even it's not a huge amount of money, but $3,000 or so and all the postings, and then find out that we're really not going ahead with that. Thank you.
Alderman Hoffman.
Yeah, well, I'm certainly against adding any staff at this time until we get our taxes down. Now, whether they're, I can't see the city falling apart just over two positions, but until we get our taxes to where they're competitive, I can't see putting on more staff. Thank you.
Alderman Wilson.
Yes, I want to thank you for the information that you gave us, Christine, and also I had some conversations also with the administrator. And based upon the workload that we're anticipating for these next few years, I don't see how the present staff is going to be able to get it all done on time and under budget. And so, based upon that and the other information that I've gotten, I would like to recommend the City Council authorize staff to begin recruitment efforts for a full-time administrative services coordinator in the administration division and full-time civil engineer in the Community Development Department.
Second.
We have a motion by Alderman Wilson and a second by Alderman Widener. Alderman Davalos, you had a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to say a couple things. I'm in favor of this, but to play the devil's advocate, I have two things. To play the devil's advocate, we're talking about 5 years. So I'm assuming we've thought about a full-time position with all the benefits versus some sort of consulting. Although consulting usually doesn't go over 5 years. But maybe you can address that just to help us in our deliberations. And then I had one more thing after that.
Okay, certainly. I appreciate the opportunity to address that specific comment, but if I could just take a minute to provide a little more context, at least from my perspective, why the civil engineer position is something that is necessary at this point in time. It's all about capacity. Without this position, I'm not confident that we have the capacity within the department to continue to effectively and efficiently manage the large volume of not only private development that's being proposed in our community, but the various public infrastructure projects that need to be implemented in conjunction with that development to support that development, and then finally to continue to advance the community enhancement infrastructure projects that we have outside funding commitments for. When we look at the amount of private development, I talked about it in some detail during my presentation last week. Within the next year, we're projecting that there's going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of $250 to $300 million worth of fairly complex, large-scale development that's going to be under construction in the city of Warrenville. These are projects that have either already been approved by the city council or are actively working through the city's review and entitlement process. Then unless something crazy goes on with the economy, a large number of those projects would be under construction sometime in fiscal year 19. So not only do we have to process those, but ultimately, once they begin construction, we have to make sure that we're overseeing the implementation of those projects in a manner that ensures that they're consistent with the approved plans and the infrastructure that they're putting in the ground or building that the city will inherit being constructed properly in accordance with the city's design regulations and standards. There's about $6 to $7 million worth of, I would say, not standard yearly infrastructure projects, but special public infrastructure projects that need to be implemented. These are complex projects. A new water tower, well, iron removal system in the Southwest District, some type of sanitary sewer attenuation facility. I mean, these are big projects that we're going to have to design and ultimately implement in the foreseeable future. And then finally, last but not least, the projects, it's about $6 or $7 million, or maybe $5 or $6 million worth of community enhancement projects. The Williams Road Path Bridge, the construction, Mac Road, thank you, Phil. The Mac Road Path Bridge, the Route 56 Streetscape Enhancement Project, the, what else is there? The Illinois Prairie Path Project and the Deal Road Turn Lane Improvement Projects. These are all significant projects that have outside funding commitments, so there's some time constraint. We can't just push these things off. Without this position, I don't feel that we would be able to effectively oversee and manage all those overlapping sometimes and sometimes competing priorities. The reality of it is we have looked at the possibility of continuing to rely almost entirely on outside consulting assistance. What I can tell you, though, is when you think about the magnitude of work that engineering type work that we have for the foreseeable future, the next 3 to 5 years, there's more than enough work to bring some more of that in-house, which I think that will improve the the quality of work that we ultimately get. And I think we'll be able to save some money doing that. An in-house entry-level staff engineer is going to cost the city, with everything all in, with your benefits and all, about $50 an hour. the cheapest outside consulting engineer that we can hire bills out at $75 an hour. If we have an in-house engineer that's able to assume some of the more daily, normal, less complicated responsibilities, that means that our senior civil engineer won't get involved with inspecting single-family grading permits and drainage complaints. She'll be able to focus on some of the more complex issues that currently we hire higher level outside engineers, which are billing out somewhere in the neighborhood of $120 to $200 an hour. So I think ultimately the city is going to save money by having this in-house engineer filled for the next 3 to 5 years. After 3 to 5 years, depending on what happens with the economy, I can't tell you that we'll continue to need this position. It is an entry-level position. If we get to a point where there's a recession, it's very likelihood that we would maybe have to lay off that person if they haven't already left. I don't think this type of position is a position that somebody will come in and fill and stay for a long period of time. Most likely they're going to fill that position maybe right out of school for a 2 to 3 year period, get their experience, and then move on to in a higher level position in another community that has a bigger organization and a bigger hierarchy of engineering positions. So that's why we're bringing this forward. I think it's the right thing to do. I think it's necessary.
Thank you. That's exactly what I was, the information that I was looking for. My second comment, actually, is just for us to, and maybe the general public, to remember what we planned and hoped for when we did our strategic plan. The number one thing on the strategic plan was the Route 59 corridor. And so, and we already had TIF 3, and we already had TIF 4, and that's what TIFs do, is they bring developers in. And then Amazon landed on our doorstep, and wow, you want to see things happen fast? Look at the Duke Parkway intersection. I've never seen IDOT move that fast ever. And so that's the kind of thing, I mean, we didn't exactly ask for all of this, but we're reacting to some of it, but this is exactly what we said we wanted. So I am definitely in favor of this. I think we need it. I think it's, yeah, I mean, it's just an indication of where we're going. And so I'm excited about all of this development, and it needs to be planned, of course, in the kind that we want here. But I don't see how our staff can do it without help at this point either. So thanks for your explanation.
Alderman Ashour, you had your hand raised.
I just I appreciate your explanation. The just looking back, we didn't have an engineer on staff, and we used consulting engineers for pretty much all of Cantera. And to their credit, it did get built properly. Just got a concern with an entry-level engineer doing duties, you know, somebody who knows this isn't their permanent place, it's not their home. What quality of work are we going to get out of them? Is it worth paying somebody $75 an hour as a consultant? That's kind of a tough one. I understand what you're saying. I just have a little reluctance because the consulting engineers are qualified, have gone through the types of projects that you're talking about. That's a hard one. Don't have buy-in completely on it.
Thank you. Alderman Goodman?
So we're being asked sort of two different things here about two different positions, so maybe four different questions, and one that we haven't really addressed here is timing. I remember last year when we talked about the timing of hiring the management analyst, and I don't want to put Analyst Miller on the spot here, but if we hadn't hired at that time, would we have gotten you? Probably not.
I think you would have. I wasn't right out of school, to say the least, but.
Right, so actually, that's exactly my question, because it looks like this civil engineer position that we're looking at is probably someone we're looking for who's right out of school, so the timing of it matters. But for the other one, it doesn't seem that way. It says right out of school plus at least 3 years of progressively responsible experience. So I don't know if the timing in the year of the hiring matters as much. I mean, that was the question last year, which was if we want somebody with this particular experience and our most likely candidates are going to be in this group, then we need to start earlier in the year and the construction season and so on. And I'm not sure if the administrative services coordinator is going to be as constrained by either the school year or the construction season.
Assistant City Administrator White.
You are correct. The administrative services coordinator position is not, we're not asking to early recruit because it's tied to someone who's either getting out of school or construction season. In that case, it is entirely due to, one, the timing of the ERP and the start of the ERP, and two, in having someone in place by the beginning of the fiscal year so that they can start to address the recruiting needs for this upcoming fiscal year and take some of that load off of me so that I can focus my attention on the ERP. So the anticipation with the ERP is that on just the human resources side of thing, there's at least a 50% in terms of hours. So we're looking at like 1,000 hours for the year, just focused on the HR component. And that doesn't include participating on the steering committee and helping with decisions and policy issues or the IT side of that component. So that is the rush, I'll call it, for filling the administrative services position sooner rather than later, so that I can try to have somebody on board in May so that they can assume some of the responsibilities and allow me to focus on the special projects and initiatives like the Quiet Zone and the ERP and all the other projects that are on the list.
And the fact that it's been vacant for a while.
Yes.
Mayor Brummel?
Just a comment about the civil engineer position, the entry-level position, in light of Alderman Ashower's comments about a consultant being in a better position to give us good advice on these things. I think the intent here is not to give that entry-level position the difficult decisions to make and the difficult projects. We have already a senior civil engineer. The idea is to free up our current engineer who's committed to the city to work on the more complex and difficult projects. And the entry-level position will be the person who gets to do the mundane, day-to-day stuff to free up our civil engineer to do the good stuff. There's a significant savings in money. The new position will be under the wing of the Community Development Department and the senior civil engineer, which will allow that person to grow in the direction that we want them to grow in. They are going to be motivated to start a career and be successful in that career. Coming here and sitting around and doing nothing is going to do nothing for their career. They're going to want to make a positive mark. So it seems to me that if we get a young person involved in this, they're going to benefit from working with us and our engineering expertise that we have, and they're going to work hard to make a positive impression so that if and when they decide to move on, they'll be in a position to get a good recommendation. So add that to the significant cost savings. This seems to me to be a very prudent thing to do on our part. We have so much going on, we can't do it anymore. We either have to not do some things, not do them as well, or get some more help to do them. It's another example of how the community continues to evolve, continues to make progress towards being a more progressive, policy-oriented, successful community. The ERP is a perfect example of that. We've done a number of things for years in a haphazard fashion. It's gotten us through. We can't do that anymore. We have to do things in a more professional way. This position will help us do that.
Alderman Hoffman?
One of the things I'm worried about is we have a new subdivision or potentially new subdivision there on Ferry Road there by Cantera Village, which the overall property tax, real estate property tax that's going to come to the city of Warrenville, I believe is $75,000, right? Now they have another proposed, I sat through the Planning Commission zoning board just this last Thursday, and there's another one coming in up over there by Cantera, by the theater. That's 241 units. I guess the gross value of that is going to be about $50 million. So let's say the one up by Ferry Road is going to be, I believe it was $89 million. And that's gonna be $75,000 to the city of Warrenville as far as property taxes. The other one's gonna be 50 million, so let's say it's gonna be about 45,000 to Warrenville. Let's say altogether, both of them, we'll throw it real high, that Warrenville gets $150,000 in real estate property taxes from both those developments. Well, with both those developments, we could very well see our population increase by 10%. Because you're looking at, there's 300 and, I believe it's 365 or 363 apartments in the one development, 241. Figure 1,300 people between the two developments. That's adding 10% to our population. Now, real estate taxes in Warrenville, I believe, to the city of Warrenville are $3.5 million a year. So we're only going to have we're going to increase the population by 10%, but we're only going to add $150,000 to the property taxes instead of $350,000. Now, I always hear about, all the sales tax that the people are going to come by shopping in the city and this and that, and okay, that's fine. $200,000 worth of property taxes, I'm not going to argue it. I don't know what that would actually come up to be. But then we have the fire department, the library, the park district that can't tap into property or into the sales tax. What's going to happen with their the property taxes for the people on, as far as those taxing districts in Warrenville? I think we need to be much more prudent as far as what we do as far as adding staff and spending money in the town, period. We find ourselves in a very bad position here coming down the road. Thank you.
Any other questions? Alderman Widener?
Yeah, I make a motion to recommend the city council authorize staff to begin recruitment efforts for a full-time administrative service coordinator in the administration department.
You know what, we already have a motion. We
Oh,
already did
I'm
that.
sorry.
We did that. I apologize.
Sorry, I lost track.
Me too. I apologize. We just need a vote. All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Motion passes. Okay, we're going to tweak the agenda a little bit here. We have the library director, Sandy Whitmer, available along with one of the library's board members. So we're going to move up items number 12 and 13. Number 12, consideration of, well, this will be number 5 now. Consideration of ownership transfer of decorative streetlights along Stafford Place and Mount Street on and adjacent to the Warrenville Public Library property. And we're going to have senior engineer Christine Hocking.
Thank you. During discussions with the Warrenville Public Library District regarding the proposed redevelopment of Civic Center redevelopment site number 1 by Earhart Construction, the library indicated their desire to transfer ownership of 11 decorative streetlights on Stafford Place and Mount Street to the city. In the backup material is a letter from the library requesting this ownership transfer, as well as a exhibit showing the lights that are to be transferred. City staff believes this is a reasonable request, as these lights currently illuminate city streets. Currently, an IGA does exist between the city and the library regarding maintenance, authorizing city staff to perform maintenance on these lights. The library does reimburse the city for these maintenance procedures. This IGA would have to be amended to remove these 11 lights. The parking lot lights, the library parking lot lights are also included in this IGA. Those would remain in the IGA, and they would remain under the ownership of the library. So we're only talking about the lights on Stafford Place and the 2 on Mountain Street. If you have any questions?
Questions? Alderman Goodman?
So what sort of precedent might this set for other decorative lights around town? I mean, you say they illuminate city streets. Are there a lot of other decorative street poles that fit that? Because I know most of the decorative lights were put up by private developers and so on historically in a very piecemeal fashion.
There are other decorative streetlights that are installed in certain areas of the community. The majority, the ones I can think of, are not intended or weren't installed in the right-of-way with the intent of illuminating public streets. They were installed on private property to provide a kind of an ornamental feature to the property. So in this case, these the decorative streetlights that we're talking about that are adjacent to the library property or on the library property adjacent to city rights of way, it's a combination of both, are clearly the only lights around that illuminate the public street there. So, and that, to me, that's the differentiating factor in this case. It warrants the city's acceptance of these lights. We have other existing decorative streetlights in these same areas that are located on the city's property that illuminate the same street. And from a practical perspective, when you look at it, they look like they're all one system. It's just that they're divided up right now into two separate systems.
So we can distinguish any other decorative lights. I know there was a recent notation in the code enforcement update about several decorative streetlights that were malfunctioning, and that's a costly thing to maintain and to repair. So I could imagine if we were not very careful about how we distinguished this, we would have a whole raft of similar requests.
Questions? Okay. No? Anybody, a motion? Okay, Alderman Goodman?
Okay, I'd like to make a motion to recommend the City Council, 1, approve the ownership transfer of the 11 streetlights from the library to the city, and 2, direct city staff and the city attorney to prepare an amendment to the existing intergovernmental agreement for light maintenance to incorporate this change.
Second.
We have a motion by Alderman Goodman and a second by Alderman Davalos. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion passes. Okay, and we're going to also then follow that up with number 13, consideration of the dedication of an easement and public right-of-way for streetlights on Warrenville Public Library property. Also, the senior city civil engineer, Christine Hocking, will bring that forward.
Thank you. 4 of the 11 streetlights that we have previously mentioned in the previous agenda item are actually located on library property. The remaining 7 are actually currently located on city right-of-way. So for the 4 that are located on library property, we are going to require a easement for the 3 that are located just in front of the library, and a right-of-way dedication for the remaining 1 that's on the western edge of the property to access, obviously, these lights and maintain them. The library would, for the easement, the library would still own the land, but the easement would grant the right to the city to access the lights. For the right-of-way dedication, this land actually becomes ownership of the city. The curb and gutter, maintenance, obviously the street light, as well as the proposed fire hydrant that is to be installed as part of the Stafford Place development. So we felt that a right-of-way dedication was warranted in this area. The platted dedication is attached for reference. The city is still working with the city attorney to review the provisions on the platted dedication and to ensure that the correct language is there, as well as the signature blocks on the plat. But so the plat is just attached for reference.
Questions, anyone? Okay. Alderman Davalos?
Maybe I missed it. Does this change the CMRP in any way to take ownership of these lights?
Yes, it's approximately $850 annually. It's
I just missed
I
it.
put it in the previous agenda item.
Got it. Okay, thanks.
Alderman Widener?
A motion to recommend the city council pass an ordinance approving the plat of dedication of easement and right-of-way.
Second.
We have a motion by Alderman Widener and a second by Alderman Wilson. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes. Okay. Thank you, Sandy and Jerry, for coming to the meeting. We let you go home early. Okay. Yeah. Back to our regular agenda format here. Now, number 5, it's the Infiltration and Inflow Reduction Program presentation by Engineering Enterprises. And Phil, are you going to do an introduction or?
Sure. We've got Michelle Piotrowski from EEI as well as Jeff Freeman to present the I&I Reduction Program presentation. They've been working with us on a contract for the last several months to help develop this program.
Okay.
So I'm going to turn it over to Michelle right now to make a detailed informational presentation here.
Okay, great. Thank you. Welcome.
Welcome. Can everybody hear me before I start going? Thank you very much for your time. We got a lot of slides. I'll be trying to move through them pretty quickly here. At the end, if you have questions, please feel free to ask whatever. But I am here. My name's Michelle Piotrowski. I'm here with my colleague, Jeff Freeman, and we've been working on the inflow and infiltration program development with staff. Quick overview, we'll be going through a background of the wastewater system, what I&I really is, and some of the goals of this program. And then we'll move through our sanitary sewer system evaluation, along with our prioritization of the areas we want to hit, and then talk about the plan and next steps. So, wastewater system overview. Warrenville has about 62 plus miles of main and 11 lift stations. And the area generally, the wastewater flows generally from the north down to south, the northwest down to the southeast here. And all the area over here, most part of the town is tributary to the Ferry Road meter, which then goes into a 27-inch interceptor sewer. The area in blue in the southeast corner is Cantera, and that's tributary to a different meter. It's the Cantera meter, which then goes into the 36-inch Naperville sewer. So that 27-inch interceptor goes into a 36-inch. This serves, over 13,000 people population right now, plus the businesses. Ultimately, from this 36-inch interceptor, it goes down to Naperville. They convey it further, and then it's treated in Naperville. And there's several agreements between the communities throughout the years to treat that. So moving forward, there's obviously a lot of future development we've heard about. We have the Southwest District, as well as there's other areas within Cantera, and then there's some, just general build out within the city as a whole. When we talk about build out, we try to normalize it with what we call population equivalent, or a PE. It doesn't mean you're going to get 7,774 people. It just means we equate 1 PE as the amount of wastewater flow for one resident. So it's just normalizing the data. So we kind of have to look at the sewers, because the way they were originally designed, land uses have changed, population has changed. So not everything's still true. So it's important to stay on top of potential capacity issues within the system. So the Naperville and Warrenville has several agreements that are based on 4 primary items. The first is the population equivalent. Right now, the population equivalent that's allowed per the agreements is 27,400. What's actually been purchased to date is just over 25,000. So there's about 2,300 left to be purchased if Warrenville so chooses. The second item is the average monthly flow. The 3 low the 3 low flow month average daily flow. And then this third item is your max daily flow, and your fourth item is your peak hourly flows. That being said, the flows, the average day, max day, they're all fluctuating and all based on the previous year. So they change year to year as far as what your limits are, so it gets a little mucky. So what we've done to do, or what we've chosen to do with this presentation is really focus on what standards are, and the IEPA uses 1P equals 100 gallons per day. So that's kind of what we're calling a theoretical maximum day flow. It can change, go up and down, but we're just doing our theoretical to keep everybody on the same page. So let's start. Let's see how much flow is coming from the system. The area in green here is what's headed to the Ferry Road meter, and so let's look at flows for the main portion of the system. You can see we have 2014 flows up through 2016 flows. One of the key things I want you to focus on here is we're seeing increases in flow. And right now we're a little over 4 MGD. The theoretical max day is 4.35. In reality right now it's lower than that, but we're sticking with theoretical maxes. And then you also, so you have the limits of the actual agreement, and then you have limits of the sewer. So that 27-inch, the sewer limit is 5.20 MGD. All the flow that's headed towards that 27-inch is coming from Warrenville. Moving forward, now you see we add in the blue section here. So that goes into the Cantera meter, and they're all heading down to the 36-inch sewer. So we're going to look at the system as a whole and what the flows are as a whole. And that is where that light orange is the Cantera flow. So you have the base flow of the other parts of the city, and then you add the Cantera. Once again, we're seeing the increase of wastewater flow throughout the years. Just adding the limits so we can visually see, we got the purchase theoretical max day flow, and then you have the max day flow, which is 6.8. All these right now show that it's under. This is just one of the parameters. We have peak flows, etc. So these are just some of the parameters we're looking at. And then we look at the 36-inch interceptor, and you say, we have lots of capacity there, but the reality is a lot of the Warrenville, or there's a large portion of Naperville flows that also go to that 36-inch. So we're really held to what's in the limit, or what's in the limits of the agreements right now. And, oh yeah, we have a bunch of development as we identified at the beginning. So how does that play into factor? So this adds on approximately the 7,800 PE that we were talking for that ultimate build-out population. Key here is flows are increasing accordingly, you know, and some of them are kind of nearing those limits or exceeding those limits as we get to the populations. And number 3, these are max day flows. Your average day flows are fine. It's the max day flows. And they're on some of the, we don't have the full hourly information or 15-minute information, but those peak flows we've seen also some concerns as we move forward. So there's different types of flows, and we're starting to see trends where they're increasing more than just with the wastewater flows. There's some stormwater associated with it. So that being said, who cares? Why have the I&I, right? And there's some potential effects of the I&I. One, first and foremost, it hits the pocketbook. Whatever is conveyed to Naperville, you will pay for that cost. Whatever's conveyed, it doesn't know if it's stormwater or sanitary, you're paying for it. Number 2, you could be hitting some of those treatment, pipe and treatment capacities, not only, you know, in the pipes within Warrenville, but what about the pipe within conveying the sanitary flow down to Naperville and then at the treatment facility as well. And then you can have something called sanitary system overflows, which we'll get into a little bit in the next few slides. But what that causes is possible some administrative issues as well as some potential fines for the city. So how do sanitary overflows happen? There's two primary setups in a house, and I'm just going through the basics of plumbing. The first setup is everything's gravity. So if you look here, everything flows down to the lowest level in the basement, and then it flows gravity out to the street. The second setup is an overhead sewer, which honestly, this is what your code currently requires, but not everything's set up this way. There's things that are grandfathered in that have gravity. So the idea here is everything flows down to the lowest level, and then there's an ejector pump that pumps it out to a higher invert of the pipe and flows out to your road. It provides a level of protection that we'll see in a little bit. So once it leaves your house, there's three main components that can cause a backup in your system and cause the capacity to increase or cause issues with capacity in the pipe. There is your wastewater, just what's coming out of your house. There is something called infiltration and then inflow, and that makes up what comes out through the pipe. Infiltration's really the water that comes through the ground. It's your leaky joints, your connections. Sometimes in the manholes outside, there's water creeps in. So it's as opposed to inflow, which is really direct connections. You see that rise of water in your sanitary sewer system immediately. It discharges directly into it. If you have roof leaders, some illegal connections, shall we say, the roof leaders or your area drains, things that are going directly into your sewer system. You can also have sanitary manholes where you have pick holes that the water goes directly into it, and you can just change out the manhole to avoid that. But it's directly increasing the water entering the system. So together, the infiltration inflow, this diagram just says this is the combination of both. What's in blue is the infiltration sources. What's in green are the inflow sources, and it just kind of identifies where you might see one or the other. Won't go into too much detail here. No, we have a packed agenda. So moving through, once again, why are we concerned with all this? And it's really we're wanting to make sure we're optimizing what we're able to convey within our sewers, so we don't have capacity issues. It can cause sewer damages or sanitary sewer damages and issues if you're constantly having full pipes everywhere and pressure. It becomes a pressure system. There's sanitary sewer overflows. And then obviously the costs. The costs are key. And then you also don't want to be in violation with your agreements with Naperville. So I said I'd get back to the sanitary sewer issues. So we have gone through what each one of these is. So this is the gravity situation. Now what happens here is if the manhole starts surcharging, your pipe's too full and it starts surcharging in the manhole, that's going to directly equal the elevation in your house, wherever it's surcharging to. So if you have gravity pipe, it's coming up wherever it is. You go to the roadway, or you start surcharging to where the road is. If you ever see it come out of the roadway, once again, that line's coming directly over. You're now really in trouble if it gets to that point. We're trying to avoid this. We're not saying this is happening in Warrenville. We're trying to avoid it. So, so this is the gravity side of things. Now, if we recall the overhead sewer side of things, if you look when you have a level of protection, if you look at your road surface here and it's surcharging, because the elevation in that pipe is lower than the roadway, nothing's coming into the house. There is a level of protection there, which is why Warrenville, I'm sure, went that way with their codes. So that moving forward, that's the basics of I&I. So what are the goals of the program? We're trying to reduce I&I. So what are our goals? We're basically trying to figure out how much I&I we're dealing with, the location, where are the highest priorities of that I&I. We're going to do that by talking to staff and getting a historical perspective of how the system has operated. And then we're going to develop a cost-effective approach to really attack the I&I concerns. And then in addition, Fermilab is one of your largest customers, so we just had some ongoing coordination and analysis with Fermilab throughout the project just to make sure we're touching base with the largest customer. So that being said, that's our goals. Let's talk about how we approach this. And I apologize because I think the different PowerPoints go to different, it just looks different, the formatting, so I apologize for the overlap there. But basically, at the onset, the first step is we break the system into basins. We want 30 to 40,000 feet of pipe in each basin. That's what we can manage and study at one time. So that's 6 to 8 miles of pipe in any given basin. And then we inventory the lift stations to see if there's any problematic areas with the lift stations as well. So that's first. Then we looked at the characterizing the I&I. How much I&I do we have? We look at the potable water, which is that blue line right here. And then we look at the wastewater flows, which is basically what you're paying Naperville, how much they're billing you, which is the yellow line. And then the difference between those two, generally speaking, is what we would call I&I. This is wastewater that we're paying for that's stormwater, it's not wastewater. And what's interesting to see is that kind of aligns with your rain flow. So that's the blue line on here. The blue line, you can see the peaks of the I&I generally align with the peaks of the I&I. So that's one way of characterizing it from a quantity perspective. Another way us engineers like to look at it is how does that relate to the number of people or PE? And we first look at potable water, and in general you think what goes into your house should come out of your house, so they should be relatively equal. So that's your wastewater use. It kind of makes sense. It might be a little less because of irrigation. However, with the what we're actually treating and seeing is the I&I. So we're around 80 gallons per day with what we're treating, just under 80, but we're actually 40% more with I&I. So that's what we're trying to minimize. That I&I will never be zero, but we can certainly get it less than 40%, generally speaking. And that's for 2015 and 2016 is what you're looking at there. So once we've established the quantity, we then sat down with city staff. They were great to work with, happy to provide whatever information they had or could get us. So thank you, staff. There was a I&I report completed back in 2000 that we reviewed just to see what they had discovered or found. And then we are also working on a capacity analysis for the Southwest District, and we were kind of analyzing some of the sanitary sewer capacity as part of that study. So we were able to pull some of that flow metering data in and kind of prioritize with that. And then we just, in general, looked at pipe material and installation date of the pipe to see what's oldest and what's newest, and there's certain types of pipe that cause more problems than others, and made some priorities based on that. So first, looking at just running through how we approached it, the documented existing historical challenges. There wasn't a ton, I'll be honest. There were some point repairs to be done and some manholes with open pick holes, they call them, but basically little holes that you use to pick the manhole up that if you cover those, it's just a way to reduce the I&I, a quick and easy way to do it. So there wasn't a ton in terms of what's been discovered to date. So then we had the findings of the 2000 report, and the highlights are there were some moderate areas of I&I, which are outlined in green there, and then there's some high priority areas for I&I to review the I&I, which are the red areas. So then we put this master spreadsheet together on the pipe material, everything we found, and we highlighted our priorities, which, so we had broken it down into 11 basins. Our goal was to get a 10 to 12 year program. It so happened it worked out with 11 because that's the length of the sewer you had. So when we started prioritizing what we call West 3 Basin, and we'll go through this exactly where these are at, but West 3 Basin rose to the top, and then after that is West 2, then Central 1. So this is the priority year to year, what we're going to use for the program. So now that we've prioritized it, how do we deal with it? What do we do with this? We know where we want to look, our best guesses. Now what do we do with it? And there's typically a 3-phased approach when you're dealing with the I&I. The first phase is flow monitoring. And basically it's going to ramp up year to year, the way the timing of each ramps up. So you really have, the first year you're just going to do phase 1 in West 3 Basin. The average cost over that 11-year period is $51,000 for phase 1 costs only. Then you have phase 2 the following year, which is really, so after you've done your flow monitoring, you're figuring out, you break your basin into sub-basins, and you go, I'm having issues in sub-basins, and a couple of the sub-basins within there. And that's usually like 10,000 feet of pipe. So you do a little further investigation. You can do televising, sanitary manhole inspections, or smoke testing. There's different, it depends on what you find with your flow monitoring. And we said the average cost of that for the whole program annually is $133,000. Then that leads to phase 3 in the third year, which is the average was $370,000. But this is just, and these are, we don't have the crystal ball. We don't know what's wrong with, or what issues might come up, or, so this number, we assumed some things to get a general budget of what we thought could be. But this is really rehabbing the system, going in and lining the manholes or lining the sewer or whatever might need to happen. This is some basic maintenance for the system. But that's going to be identified in the previous phases, and we really can't pinpoint that number until then. So the way this shakes out is we put this, we love spreadsheets, so we put a spreadsheet together year by year of how much we're looking at year to year. And ultimately, you can see we're going to start out slow. We're going to be at about $48,000 the first year because we just have phase 1 in one basin. Second, or fiscal year 20, we're going to be at $193,000 or $194,000 because now we have a phase 1 going in one of the basins and a phase 2 in West 3, and then we're adding on the phase 3. So after fiscal year 21, you'll on average be spending, if our crystal ball is right, around $600,000 a year is what we're projecting for that I&I program annually. So this is just a summary of the basins based on the fiscal year it will begin and the lengths. And just to highlight as we go to the next, and of course, there we go. This is West 3 Basin. And to zoom in on that, it's north of Butterfield Road, west of 59, and south of Summer Lakes. It's kind of an industrial area, sits back there with a little bit of residential closer to the Route 59. So that's the first area that we're recommending approaching. So as part of this, next steps, number one, to continue with the I&I initiative and reduction initiative. First of all comes budget, to make sure, you know, the money's being set aside. Number two is documentation. It's absolutely key. It always takes us longer to document than it does to actually do the work. But it's very important, because as you have transitions among staff, the intent of this process is to go, it's never going to end. Once you finish at Basin 11, you start back over with Basin 1, because the infrastructure is getting older. It's an ongoing initiative once you've started it. There are standards that are recommended to follow with NASCO and PACP, and then the GIS. There's all these acronyms we like to throw around, but the key is documentation and standard documentation. So if staff needs training to keep them up to speed on that, whatever it is, documentation is very, very important. And then obviously we'll continue to work with Fermilab as time goes on to see how things go. But with that, I just want to once again thank staff. As I said, great to work with, and it's been a pleasure. And I'll open it up to any questions you might have.
Any questions? Alderman Goodman?
Thanks. I know I learned a lot. When you compared the potable water versus the wastewater and said, okay, this 40% is sort of the I&I and that's way too high, just for the sake of comparison and assuming that I know nothing about this, what's a better number? What's our target, or what's typical if 40% is way too high?
I think what we try to do is not focus on, it's the cost of the I&I, number one, and we try to focus on improving the city and using that as a benchmark for the city. The problem is when you start making comparisons amongst other communities, every system is so unique and different. Your system's, 50th anniversary, right? So that's the oldest your sewers are. How do you compare that to sewers that are 150 years or 100 years old, or some newer systems that are 20 years old? And there's different types of pipe material, like truss pipe. So there's not necessarily a good comparison, and there's not really, unless Jeff's aware of something that I'm not, but.
I think your goal could be 20%.
Oh, you need to come up to the mic.
Yeah, people are watching at home.
Yeah.
I think your, excuse me, I think your goal would be about 20%. So targeting around gallons per capita per day in your system would be ideal.
Okay, because it's never going to be zero, you said. So.
No, I mean, it's impossible to get those watertight, just like it's impossible for a water distribution system to convey everything and not lose anything. You want to minimize it, as Michelle indicated. With the sanitary sewer system, certainly the lower the better, but getting to zero it would be far too costly to try to achieve that goal.
Right, so at some point we wouldn't be getting a good rate of return on our investment.
That is correct.
All right, my other question is, you talked about Fermilab quite a bit. Why isn't Fermilab on any of these maps? Did we not study them or look at their basin?
Can you hear me? So yes, we did have some discussions with Fermilab, and it was, we've been monitoring that. They are on maps. What's interesting about Fermilab is, and it's not a direct comparison, and why we didn't feel comfortable presenting specifics on that, we serve a lot more of Fermilab by water than we take out with sewer. So only a portion of Fermilab, a small portion, is served by sewer versus the amount of water or the amount of area that we serve by water. So it's not a direct correlation, and didn't feel like it was a fair apples to apples comparison with them.
Okay, and there must be a lot of different rules involved about, federal property and what they can or can't do or will let us do to their systems there, but we must have easements and so on. So if we wanted to I don't know, assign resources to their basin and go in and make these kinds of improvements, we'd be able to do that, or we'd be able to tell them to do that?
And I'll let you talk if you want, but we've been working with them, and they've been maintaining and been very willing to do whatever we need them, whatever information we've needed.
We televised their system back in November with their permission, so we could start to give them some idea of what defects might be in their pipes. And there's a fairly significant amount of INI that's coming from their system, but it is their system, and they pay us to accept those flows, which then we are also paying Naperville to accept those flows. But we have the ability, I've been to review the agreement, but we've got the ability to charge them more if they exceed certain levels of flow. I'm going to be working with them. I gave them a real brief, simplistic analysis of what I believe their portion of the INI is. I mean, they're typically about 4% of our sewer flows on dry weather. That number increases about 10% of our flows in wet weather. And when you just look at what you're assuming is the INI portion of those flows, they're up to about 17% of our INI. So it's almost 1/5 of our INI. So they're a significant contributor to that, and we're going to work with them to reduce that.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor Brummel?
This is a significant long-term investment. Do we have any idea of how the benefits of reducing the INI are going to fit into the financial picture here? If we do indeed get down 20%, do we have any idea of how much cost savings that will be in terms of our treatment with Naperville?
Michelle put together a spreadsheet for us, and I believe the total cost if you were to eliminate 100% was something like $290,000 a year. Obviously, we're not going to reduce 100% of it, but that gives you an order of magnitude as far as how much we're paying Naperville per year to treat INI. So you're looking close to $300,000 of paying them to treat our stormwater flows. So if we reduce that by half, then it's $150,000 a year.
Okay, so there's some significant savings through doing the program. The other aspect is that we pretty much have to do this because of our agreement with Naperville and because of the fact that we're increasing capacity with our development, that they want reassurance that we're going to do this type of thing to make sure that they're not going to be over capacity because of us. Is that a fair assessment?
That is a fair assessment. And they've been very aggressive about attacking their INI issue, and they spend quite a bit of money per year in their budget to evaluate their system and to line pipes and that type of stuff. So.
And it seems like a pretty fair request or demand on their part because it's their system and we're contributing to that system. They're asking us basically to be as responsible as possible with our contribution.
That's correct.
Thank you. Thank you.
Administrator Coakley?
Thank you. I would add 2 points onto everything that was just presented and said. One is we should look at this as part of our normal maintenance for our sewer system going forward. We did a really good program back in 2000, and then we've been very busy and trailed off, and the system's gotten 18 years older, and it doesn't get any better with age. Pipes crack and separate, and it doesn't get better, and we've just increased the inflow. Secondly, I would add, by nature, worst case scenario to the cost savings, which is a very good point. Should we not do anything and start to exceed the flows, it's not just the Naperville agreement that we're going to be running afoul with. We're going to get in trouble with the IEPA eventually via our Naperville agreement, and there could be fines assessed as well, which we certainly want to avoid. We don't want the property damage that could occur, private property damage, and we don't want the other issues. So if we start to think of it as something we need to do going forward, our system has gotten older, we need to do that kind of extra maintenance, it will become more routine as we go along, and we will have to certainly reflect the costs, increased costs in our sewer rates, but the cost and reduction of costs, the net effect will not be as significant as just the number you're seeing up there. Thank you.
Alderman Wilson?
Just one question, and this is all in the sewer. Is this all taken care of in the enterprise fund aspect as opposed to general funds?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Alderman Goodman?
I wonder if staff thinks we need to revise the EMRP with this in mind. I mean, I know we spent a lot of time doing that, and we certainly did not include this.
And I've got to work with Finance Director Dahlstrand. We spoke recently about sewer and water rates, and One of the things he believes is going to be beneficial in the next year or two is to get some professional help to do a rate study to see where we should be right now and where we should be moving forward with taking costs like this into account that we're going to be incurring over the years.
Okay, so that's a partial answer to what I was asking for. I mean, if we do have to change rates, then it would be for increased maintenance costs due to dealing with the I&I problem. And then that would really also, I think, affect how much we can save for the EMRP long term. You know, we had these targets for funding, I believe it was 15% and 30% for water and for sewer. And we just aren't going to be able to do that. I think that's going to have to be revised with this in mind. We're just not going to be able to do that unless we increase rates by a lot more than I think people would like to see.
Correct.
Okay. All right, well, if we end up having to revise the EMRP assumptions and set funding amounts at a different level, would we do that then after the rate reassessment or sort of in conjunction with it, because we have to think about those two pieces at the same time?
I think we do it in conjunction with the rate reassessment.
Okay, thanks.
Alderman Ashour?
Do you have any feeling about how much of this is the illegal sump pump dumping into sanitary sewers instead of out into their yards? And what do other communities do about that? How do we resolve that? Because it involves going on private property. It's going to be a big issue. And we just talked about other water problems that we don't have in the city, and it's because some of the houses are dumping the sanitary sewers.
Yes, as far as the amount, it is hard to say until you start getting into more of the deeper studies. We can kind of select the area in phase 1, and then we identify where those areas are when we start doing phase 2. So the amount, it varies community to community, basin to basin. So I don't have a good feel or know for certain. I can't give you that amount. As far as what other communities do, I mean, this is obviously policy decision, anything that would happen. I'm sure as we go into the phase 2 and we learn about what's there, we'll probably work with staff to establish some thoughts and some guidance there. But there are different programs. There's a variety of ways to handle it, but it would certainly be something that's brought back to City Council for a policy decision. Does that, are you looking for?
Well, I was looking for something a little more definitive, but it's probably the first thing we can do to stop paying for water to be treated that shouldn't be, and any recommendations that we can do immediately are important. We should be sending out notices, inspections, anything like that. That's the first thing we can do that stops spending money unnecessarily on sewage treatment.
Yes, I mean, there's some, did you want to talk?
I was just
or
going
do you
to, in one of the recent newsletters, we did put something that was more of a voluntary inspection. An educational thing saying that the sump pump connections are not, or they're, I don't know if it's actually they're illegal, but they're the problems with connecting a sump pump to the sanitary sewer, and provided a number for them to call for a voluntary inspection. To the best of my knowledge, nobody's called yet, but I know with the drainage assistance program, private property drainage assistance, we actually got, it's probably a drop in the bucket, but one sump pump disconnected from the sanitary sewer last year in Harvest Court and Lakeview Court project and connected to a storm sewer. I think that's where that program could have a beneficial impact by, if you recall, we included in the rankings or the priorities, if you do have sump pumps that are connected to the sanitary sewer, that's going to help bump your project up in terms of the rankings and allow it to be rated higher than other projects might be, so we can get those disconnected and trying to attack in sort of a voluntary way. But I haven't dealt personally with going in and enforcing inspections of everybody, all the individual homes, and trying to enforce them to disconnect.
Well, I think it's going to be an important part of what's going on moving forward, and maybe finding out from other cities what they do to enforce the ordinance that would prevent that from happening, or what kind of fines they charge, or those are the type of things that stop people from doing things they shouldn't.
Absolutely.
Yeah, more on that topic, if it's okay. Certainly, again, it's a policy decision. You can start with voluntary programs. Some communities, you'll see it in the flow monitoring when you go to that phase 2 that Michelle had referenced, and she had commented a little bit about smoke testing and field work. You can have, as part of that process, to set up visits within households to inspect their plumbing. A lot of folks may not take that approach to start with. They just want to see and assess and see where they're at, but you can do that. Once you know that people, if they do have sump pumps attached, you can immediately require them to remove the connection. A lot of times that can be a challenge because there's drainage issues related to that. There was probably a reason why they connected to the sanitary sewer. There isn't a storm sewer close by. You start to create puddles in people's yards. If they transfer some of that flow to their neighbor, who may actually be fine as far as where their sump pump goes, those type of considerations need to be taken into account. Other alternatives are requiring the sump pump review at a sale of the house. And then if you find that there is that connection, then they have to solve it then. Like Michelle had indicated, we can bring a lot of those policies to you at an appropriate time, and then you can kind of decide, I guess, globally what makes sense moving forward.
Do you folks monitor or have any way to check to see whether what Naperville's charging for us is accurate, whether their meters are correct? Because if it, any excess flow, or if the meter's wrong in their favor, they're not going to fix it.
We do have meters within town that we compare to the Naperville's meter readings. So we have, I think, 3 meters that we compare, that we tally the flows from. We compare that to Naperville's 1 meter that's downstream of all those. And John Satter keeps a really close eye on that. And at some point last year, the differential between those two, because they're not going to be exact. I mean, having this open flow measurements are not going to be perfect a match, but I think we were getting something on lines like 10% different. And so we sat down with Naperville and ADS, which is the company that provides the meters and monitors them, and did some tweaking to their meters and ours to get them closer. And I think we're under, if we can keep it under like 6 or 7% difference, that we're happy. And as it creeps up to that 7% range again, then we'll review them. Maybe the meters need to be cleaned off, or something needs to be adjusted with them to calibrate them. But I think recently we were at that kind of 2 to 4% range difference between our readings.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right, that was an information only, so now we're going to move on to number 6, engineering contract, consideration of engineering contract for sanitary sewer flow monitoring. Deputy Works Director Kukler.
You just listened to EI's fairly lengthy presentation on this subject. This is a contract from them for $47,856 to perform the flow monitoring for West 3 Basin Phase 1. So that's the very first step in this I&I reduction program. Like I said, you heard everything from them just now. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them, but this will be the very first step of what's going to be an 11-year program here, and then ongoing after that even.
When would the program start then, if this was approved?
This would be next fiscal year, so I think the ideal time to do the sanitary sewer flow monitoring is May and June. So we approve the contract now so they can hit the ground running and get those meters in place in May.
Okay. Any other questions? Alderman Goodman?
So my understanding is that this is just a contract for the basin around the industrial park.
Correct.
Have we been in touch with any of the people in the industrial park yet about this, or we will be going forward as we monitor it, or putting monitors in near them? I mean, I guess my question is, are there any special considerations that might make an industrial park an area that's more likely to have problems with this kind of thing? I mean, heavy equipment causing leaks sounds very plausible to me.
Grab my.
You have to go to the microphone. You can use the hand mic.
Can you hear me? As far as the flow meter goes, there's no significant impact. You open up a manhole and you place it in there, and you get automatic meter reads. There is obviously, when we analyze the data, we take into account possible operational issues and concerns, and it almost is more indicative of what have they done. So after we've seen the data, we might go back to some folks and try to understand the operations and why we had peaks in the middle of the night versus in the middle of the day when you think we would see them. So I think it's more once we've seen the data that we would hit them.
Okay, so no real communication with them yet, but we probably will going forward. All right, thank you.
Okay, Alderman Wilson?
Then I'd like to make a recommendation that the city council, recommend the city council pass a resolution approving the contract with Engineering Enterprises, Inc. for the West 3 Basin and River Siphon Infiltration and Inflow Investigation in an amount of $47,856 and authorizing the city administrator to execute the proposal.
Second.
We have a motion by Alderman Wilson and a second by Alderman Widener. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion passes. Number 7, informational presentation of memorandum of understanding with Naperville regarding the sanitary sewer flows. Phil Cooper. Like,
Thank you again.
it's after 9.
I know. I'll keep this brief. The MOU that's in the agenda, included with the agenda backup materials, summarizes and generally the first section of it, generally what the agreement says. We've got an intergovernmental agreement with Naperville to convey and treat our sanitary sewer flows. And then there's an amendment, the main amendment that was most important is the one that happened when Cantera developed, and it allows us to purchase additional capacity. It also defines how much capacity we could purchase. The second part of the MOU summarizes what Naperville and City and Warrenville staff agreed on in terms of some commitments on both ends. Naperville's end, it tends to be how quickly they'll work with us and respond to requests, and they'll commit to continue to sign off on the EPA permit applications as we have public and private sewer extensions in town, which allows us then to keep working with the developers and getting those projects moving along. On our end, we're going to update that, as I mentioned in my budget presentation, the sewer capacity analysis or interceptor capacity analysis that was done back when Cantera was developed, and we're going to work with Naperville to develop that scope of work, hire an engineer in the upcoming fiscal year and get that work done. And they do have the right within the Second Amendment to the original IAGA, which is the one that relates to Cantera, to require us to install essentially a holding tank for sanitary sewer flows during wet weather. Ron referred to it earlier when he was answering a question about a flow attenuation facility, and that's another item that's as part of that sanitary sewer interceptor flow analysis or update. The engineer would also evaluate the capacity that tank might need to be and how large it might, how large and how many gallons it would need to hold to sort of shave the peak off the sanitary sewer flows during wet weather. And Naperville right now, if they felt that we were in violation of the peak flows that are going down to them, could require us now to do that. There's a provision in that amendment where the developer of Cantera was supposed to set aside a piece of property that was like 75 feet by 75 feet for that purpose, and they could require us to do that. And there's, if we were exceeding the peak hour and peak day flows that are in the agreement. So that is what's beneficial about these commitments is it gives us, we define a certain amount of time that we'd have to respond. So if Naperville says, you know what, Warrenville, we've got to do this, we've got a certain amount of time to, after we were able to acquire property and purchase that property, there's I think we have 18 months then to design and construct it after we would acquire the property. So it helps to set that and establish that. It gives us some predictability in terms of if Naperville were to direct us to do something, we can respond to it and budget for it appropriately. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Alderman Goodman?
So about building the holding tank, it really says in this agreement, we will do it. It doesn't sort of say if.
It's going to be required at some point. I mean, with the amount of, we're not fully built out yet. We don't have everything connected to the sanitary sewer that's going to be connected. And we're not going to fully reduce the INI down to zero, a zero flow. It's, I think the addition of Cantera to the system while they can provide additional treatment plant capacity and expand the plant, they can't increase that size of that pipe cheaply. I mean, I think it would be seriously like hundreds of millions of dollars to increase the size of the pipe from Warrenville all the way down to the plant. So the way to help attenuate that, John's going to cringe here, but I compared this to kind of like a detention basin for like storm sewer. So when you get a storm and a big inflow of water, you need a place for it to gather and sit and be stored and then release slowly back into the system as the storm goes away. But this would not be like a lagoon or an open system. This would be a tank that's enclosed.
Okay, and it says it could be outside of the Cantera development, which is pretty vague. I mean, it could be inside. Is that
It could be. The reason I think it would serve, there's more flow outside of the Cantera development or outside of Cantera from Warrenville than within Cantera. And so I think it would have a bigger impact and easier to knock some of the head off that peak flow if you have it where there's more flow coming through the sanitary sewer. So I would think it'd be somewhere down, ideally somewhere down near Ferry Road, maybe north or south of Ferry Road where our interceptor drains to.
Okay, so not in an area where there's a lot of development going on, not in an area where there's a lot of property for sale. I mean, I wouldn't want to torpedo some of our nice development by saying, well, actually, this piece of land we have to buy and put a big tank in.
No, we will evaluate different locations for that and see where take those factors into account as well as where it makes the most sense from an engineering perspective.
Okay, so there's a lot of constraints relative to the location of this and the size of the pipe at that location, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
So then we'd be pretty stuck as to which property we need to buy. You know, might not have very many choices.
There probably aren't a ton of choices, but I think we will have some flexibility, and we will also evaluate whether building it in Cantera would be appropriate and have the desired effect or not, because we do have some new developments in Cantera that are coming through, and they want something from us. This would be an opportunity for them to ask them to set aside a piece of land for us to be able to do this on too.
So is this the sort of thing that you could put under other stuff? Or is this the sort of thing where you need to have a big open space?
Potentially, you could build it under maybe a parking lot or something like that, but you're talking probably a rectangular type basin. Then, working with the EEI, they described one in like Bartlett or somewhere that's kind of more like for lack of a better term, like a silo, cylinder type shape. And depending on the depth of sanitary sewer, you might actually be able, if the sanitary sewer is really deep, you might be able to bury part of that underground too and have less height to it that's exposed above ground.
Okay, wow, I was not picturing a silo. When you were This is all very new to me, and I'm learning a lot. Thank you. Okay.
Alderman Hoffman?
Comes to mind is back a couple of years ago, I remember talk about eliminating the water tank or the well over there by Bauer Elementary School. Couldn't that be used as a sewage treatment plant if we just, they did in fact eliminate that well as they talked, as I believe there was talk about it back a couple of years ago. Why couldn't that tank there be utilized as a sewage treatment or a sewage holding tank?
We're actually looking at eliminating the ground storage tank there, but the well will remain. So the well in the well building will be in operation there. That tank is it doesn't serve a lot of purpose right now, but the interior of it is degrading, and we would need, even just to maintain it as a water tank, we need to upgrade it. I'm not sure you want that sanitary sewer holding tank that close to your water system, though. I'm also not sure what
running water
purpose.
mains right next to sewer mains. So I mean, but all right, thank you.
Okay, that was a information only. So we'll go on to number 8, consideration of engineering contract for Landon Sewer reconstruction. We need the senior civil engineer, Christine Hocking.
Thank you. The city is currently completing the design of a 12-inch sanitary sewer extension from Landon Avenue to Route 59. This is anticipated to be constructed in the spring, summer of this year. In order to handle the eventual sanitary flow from, the eventual full build-out of the Southwest District, the sewer downstream of this extension sewer will need to be reconstructed from an 8-inch, currently existing 8-inch sewer to a 12-inch sewer main. We believe that the correct method and means to reconstruct the sanitary sewer is to do a pipe bursting rather than an open cut type of construction, so the design will be geared towards pipe bursting this pipe. The staff followed the QBS process and sent the proposal sent the proposals to 2 qualified consultants. Thomas Engineering Group was selected as the most capable project team. The costs for the engineering design have already been included in the FY18 budget, and staff have reviewed the costs and the proposal that was submitted and the schedule that was submitted by Thomas and find them reasonable for the work associated with this project. If there's any questions?
Questions? Mayor Brummel?
Technical question, pipe bursting. That intrigues me. I'm picturing putting a balloon in the pipe and making it bigger and then shoving a new pipe through that. I don't know, does that make any sense? Can you enlighten us a little bit as to how that works?
It's something like that, not really, but it's actually very new to myself as well. As I was reading the proposal from Thomas Engineering Group, they actually contacted a vendor who does this specific type of work. I don't know if you can describe it a little bit more.
My understanding is they pull something through the pipe that actually breaks the pipe. I mean, it's PVC pipe, so it's going to take something that's actually break it, and then you pull a larger pipe through it. So that existing pipe material will remain in place, but it's broken and pulls apart, so you can pull the 12-inch pipe essentially through the same area as the...
Must be a significant amount of force to displace the ground or whatever around.
It is.
So it just basically literally bursts the pipe, makes a wider hole, and then a new pipe is put in. So I was right.
Yep. Just not a balloon.
Not a balloon, probably. Thank you.
Any questions? Okay, I'd like to have a motion. Alderman Goodman?
I'd like to make a motion to recommend the City Council pass a resolution approving the contract with Thomas Engineering Group LLC for the Landon Road Sanitary Sewer Reconstruction Design Engineering Services in an amount of $33,355 and authorizing the city administrator to execute the proposal.
We have a motion by Alderman Goodman and a second by Alderman Wilson. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion passes. On to number 9, consideration of bid letting and construction engineering contract for the 2018 road program prior to approval of the FY 2019 budget. Again, Senior Civil Engineer Christine Hocking.
Thank you. As in previous years, we are presenting a recommendation to authorize the bid letting for the road program prior to the formal approval of the FY19 budget. The streets included in the 2018 road program are shown in the memo in the backup materials. This includes Burke, Cerny Roads and Circle, Landon Avenue, Main Street, Mignon, Wagner, and Warren Avenue. Ray Street is on the list, but that is not going to be included in the 2018 road program. That is going to be pushed to the to next year, the following fiscal year, due to the large amount of projects that will be going on this year. Total costs for the budget include $950,000 for resurfacing and $90,000 for permeable pavers along the parking areas on Warren Avenue. The construction engineering contract is anticipated to be about $70,000. And advertising for this project will occur in March to get better prices for the city, as we have done in previous years. The project won't likely start before May, so the funds won't be expended until the budget is approved. If there's any questions?
Alderman Widener?
Yeah, I know we're trying to limit questions, but I just wondered, we had talked about the evaluation for and potential for sidewalks on some of these streets that will be included as part of the road program, and also things like, you know, widening the width a little bit for biking and so forth. I just wonder if any of these streets are being evaluated under that premise.
No, they are not.
No. Okay, I just remember with Williams Road last year, we had a large contingent of the neighbors that came in seeking sidewalks in their neighborhood, and I just wonder how staff is going to react to that if the situation should reoccur.
I think that's why it's important to have that complete streets policy development discussion this year, because this would help us looking forward inform how we approach these things. Because right now we can't use CMRP dollars because it's for maintenance and replacement of existing infrastructure. So we do not have a funding source for installing new sidewalks, and installing sidewalks in these rural areas is expensive. I mean, it's not a simple process because you've got ditches and the road elevation relative to the parkway may not be adequate for it. You might be talking curb and gutter installation, storm sewer installation. You also have people that have stuff in the right of way that needs to be moved or worked around as well. And we haven't had any sort of policy discussion on whether, are you looking at sidewalks on one side of the street, both sides of the street? Do the residents have any say in whether they get sidewalks or not? Are we going to force it down their throats? I mean, there's a much larger policy discussion that has to be had here before we just start looking at these right now.
Else? Okay. Motions? Alderman Goodman?
I'd like to make a motion to accept the staff recommendation and authorize staff to advertise bids for the 2018 road program prior to the formal approval of the fiscal year 2019 budget.
We have a motion by Alderman Goodman and a second by Alderman Wilson. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion passes. On to number 10, consideration of a request to dispose of surplus city-owned property. And now we have management analyst Justin Miller.
Good evening, council. Again, I'm bringing a request forward to utilize the services of Obanoff Auction Services to dispose of some surplus equipment in the Public Works Department. That would include 2 snowplow trucks, 4 miscellaneous snowplow cutting-edge blades, and approximately 46 chairs. Again, we would utilize Obanoff, which is an online open forum for being able to place bids on those items. And again, we would receive 94% of the money back. They charge a 6% fee to the city for utilizing their services. So I'll entertain any questions.
Questions? Alderman Goodman?
I'd like to make a motion to recommend the City Council approve an ordinance authorizing disposal of city-owned surplus property utilizing Obanoff Auction Services.
Second.
We have a motion by Alderman Goodman and a second by Alderman Davalos. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion passes. We're on a roll. Consideration of an easement agreement with DuPage County. Deputy Public Works Director Kugler.
Thank you. When the Warrenville Road Bridge was reconstructed by DuPage County a few years ago, we entered into an intergovernmental agreement with them, and as part of that, we committed to granting them an easement for some storm sewer that drains the Warrenville Road right away through Leon Schmidt Park before it connects to our storm sewer. The county was recently going through their paperwork, realized we had never granted that easement, so they submitted a draft easement agreement to us. I worked with the city attorney to review that agreement and went back and forth with the county a little bit on some of the items in it, and what you see in the agenda backup materials is the final version of that, and so we're looking for that to be approved by the city and then ultimately be approved by the county as well.
Any questions? Okay. Motion? Alderman Goodman?
I'd like to make a motion to recommend that the City Council pass an ordinance approving a grant of easement to DuPage County for a storm sewer in Leon Schmidt Heritage Park.
Second.
A motion by Alderman Goodman and a second by Alderman Davalos. All those in favor? Opposed? Okay, motion passes. We had previously done 12 and 13, so we're on to number 14. Discussion of safety study of intersections at Continental and Illinois Route 59 and Batavia and Butterfield roads. Deputy Public Works Director Kugler.
Thank you. There's really only one item remaining from the city's original letter to IDOT that was not addressed in some way by IDOT. Either they're telling us that they're not going to do anything about that, they can't, or that directing the city to redo the striping, or there's been a variety of things that have been addressed by IDOT. So there's really only one item that's unresolved from that letter, and that was the lighting of the intersection of Route 59 and Continental Avenue. IDOT was clear they won't be funding the design or construction of this or ultimately maintaining it. If this was to move forward as with the intersections to be lighted, it was going to be done by the city and paid for by the city. Using the bid prices that we received for the intersection of Route 56 and Batavia Road, which is going to be lit as part of that project, I estimate that the cost to put streetlights at the Route 59 intersection would be anywhere from about $350,000 to $390,000, depending on how many phases of engineering you have to do, and that would really be dependent on how much the source of the funding. So if there was federal funding, you'd have to go through a phase 1 and phase 2 engineering before you could construct it. If we use local funding, we could do it in one phase. But it's a fairly expensive endeavor, and it's also, there's a permit required by IDOT, so it's not like we can just go buy, a handful of light poles and just go put them up. I mean, there's a process to work through with IDOT on that, and it is costly to design and construct those lights in accordance with IDOT standards for lighting a roadway. Ultimately, depending on how many phases of engineering there are, the time frame for design and construction could range from like 18 months to 36 months. Given again the amount of work we've got in the upcoming fiscal year 19, proposed in the 19 budget, I don't see that staff has the capacity to handle the design and construction of a project in the upcoming fiscal year. I am also a little bit concerned that there are other similar intersections on state routes that are lit by a single ComEd light or not lit at all that do have pedestrian crossings at them. That we might be setting a precedent that if we would light this one, well, why wouldn't we light, say, Batavia Road in 59 or Ferry Road in 59? And you're starting to add up, $350,000 per intersection. That gets pretty expensive. And then we're also adding on, $9,000 to $13,000, I think was my analysis for the CMRP for each of those intersections as well. And so every time there's a knockdown pole, even though insurance might cover that from the driver, that's something we've got to deal with and order a new pole, install it, and all that stuff. Or probably, with the height of those poles, have a contractor install it for us. And I realize that not all the intersections that have pedestrian crossings in these state routes, like say when we build a path on Mack Road, are going to be the same as Batavia Road in 59 or Continental in 59, because the number of people that might be using the path that goes into the Forest Preserve at night is probably pretty minimal to none. So you wouldn't necessarily be as concerned at those locations as you are at these locations where you have businesses around and neighborhoods that people are biking or walking to and from. So it may not be all of those intersections, but there are at least a couple of other intersections where it should be considered when you're considering whether we light this intersection or not. Ultimately, if council is interested in lighting this intersection, my recommendation would be that we be directed as staff to go seek out outside grant funding opportunities to help reduce the amount of cost the city would have to pay for this. And there are some funding opportunities we could seek out, but that would be the first step I would recommend, as opposed to just going out and setting aside general fund money to pay for this and going out and designing it this year and overloading, again, adding onto our workload, which is already pretty extensive.
So what do you think the amount of funding we could get? What is like the percentage that we could possibly get from a grant?
A lot of times, some of the, I'm not saying surface transportation program funds would be applicable to this, but a lot of the outside grant funding we get from that are federal dollars tend to be in the neighborhood of like 70 to 80% federal dollars versus 20 to 30% local.
And there are grants available now that we could apply for?
We could have actually, Christine had just applied for, was it ITEP? ITEP funding for sidewalks along 59 this year, and had the timing been a little different, that could have been incorporated in that application. The lighting could have been incorporated in that application as well, and I think that's an 80-20 cost share.
And once the application is put forward, approximately how long does it take to get an answer for something like that?
It's for the Illinois Transportation Enhancement Program funding, it's a little bit variable. I mean, sometimes that's tied to some political announcements and things like that. If somebody's running for office, they might want to show that they've providing funding for a variety of projects in Illinois to get some votes that might tie into it. I mean, it varies. It'll be at least a couple of months. Christine submitted an application in December for the Route 59 sidewalks, and it's only about 2 months later, and we haven't heard yet, but it'll be a few months. I don't think it would be like a year.
So it could be approximately maybe anywhere from 3 to 6 months?
That's probably a pretty good estimate.
Any other questions? Alderman Widener?
Yeah, so the amount of time that you're going to take to investigate grants would be 3 to 6 months, and then it would be 36 months after that, if the grant was awarded, that the project would be completed. So you're talking 42 months before a project like that would be.
Well, the timing of some of those, the grant funding too, with an ITEP grant, I think they're tend to be every 2 years. Depending on the source of funding, they have a certain time frame and deadline that you have to respond, or you have to submit also. So Christine submitted in December, because that was probably when the deadline was for this most recent call for projects. And so timing of, depending on what grant sources we find, the timing of their call for projects is different. I mean, for instance, a lot of our STP projects we get funding for, the Mac Road path, and those are annual call for projects, so they have been to this point through DMMC. They don't really have. I can't remember if there's a lighting component that you're able to tap into for STP funds or not, but it really depends on the source of the funding. They have different timeframes and deadlines for their projects. They also have, so like I said, some are annual, some are every 2 years, and then there's some that come up just kind of out of the blue too. That's you don't expect.
But it sounds like, best case scenario, you're looking at 3 years before you change the illumination at that dangerous intersection.
Yeah, I would say it's probably a fair assessment.
And then it looks like with the complete streets policy for consideration of sidewalks and things like that, it looks like we're going to be 2 or 3 years out before we see an implementation of sidewalks being planned for as part of the road program.
Yeah, it could be. Yeah, there's some advanced. If we decide for the sidewalk issue, if we decided for Street A that we wanted to install sidewalks, you're going to have to. There's additional design time that's going to be required. You're going to probably in the previous fiscal year have to have a design engineer under contract to go survey it and design those. So,
have we investigated any kind of bulbs with more illumination power for any of those dimly lit? That was the other question I had. The intersection at Continental and 59, I thought was darker than the other intersections. I don't know if that's true or not, but I thought the illumination standards were different there than they were at the other places of concern that you mentioned.
I don't know if they're different, but I think that, for instance, at Batavia Road, you've got more ambient light from all the businesses that are around there. You've got the gas station, Walgreens, the shopping center with Family Foods and that. So I think you've got more ambient light there that helps to provide it. Whereas at Continental and 59, there's really no other light, or at least it's a little further away. IDOT does have standards and limitations on what is called a beacon light, which is when you have one light at an intersection, on how many watts what the wattage of that light can be. And I want to say it's something fairly small, like 100 watts or something. So they would limit ComEd and how bright that light could be there. And when you start designing lighting for an intersection, they've got transition lighting from each of the approaches to the intersection. So you go from dark to light. It's not just a sudden thing. It transitions, so you're not startled going in and out of from light to dark and dark to light.
Okay. I just wondered whether or not we would be able to investigate an alternative that would get us there, faster than 3 years. It's disappointing. I know the city likes to hang their hat on the safety awards that we get, and it just seems like, for the safety improvements for the movement of, pedestrians and bicyclists and everything like that, if we could somehow, move it forward sooner than, it taking 3 or 4 years for some of these improvements, that would be my preference. But, I don't have a disagreement with anything that you're recommending. It's just that expediting things along these lines is difficult sometimes with all the phase 1, phase 2 engineering. But if there's any way to, especially these places of concerns where we've had, incidents and deaths of individuals, whatever we can do to make those places safer faster would be a great movement.
I would like to point out that in many of those incidents that happen at night, that the pedestrians were crossing against the signal, and I can't say everyone, but there were multiple occasions where they were crossing against the signal wearing dark clothes, and there's some amount of responsibility for pedestrians to actually obey the law, and use the push buttons that are available there and to activate the signal. When you're trying to cross the street against the signal, and I don't want anybody to die, but those drivers are probably traumatized. So it also points, for the driver's sake as well, to lighting the intersection to help them. But if you have somebody in dark clothes that you're not expecting to cross there and trying to dodge traffic, that's difficult for both the driver and the pedestrian in that situation. If the pedestrian would wait until the traffic is actually stopped and has a signal and the right way to cross.
And we've talked about the signal activation, and when a pedestrian activates the signal, it makes a whole nother cycle before they get the pedestrian crossing green hand or the countdown light. So it doesn't immediately respond to the pedestrian that's pushing the activation button. It goes through a whole nother cycle. So the pedestrians that were hit, could have activated the walk signal and just not had waited for the additional cycle to occur that would allow them to have the countdown light and go across. So in that case, it's not necessarily dark clothing or anything like that. It's a fault. I don't know if you would put it back on the technology or whatever, but the system doesn't immediately respond to the pedestrian crossing the street. So.
Sure, and it's also important to point out these aren't happening all at the intersection at the crosswalks. And I think one of the incidents was up by Winchester. There's another one somewhere along the side of 59 north of the intersection. They're not happening immediately necessarily at the intersection. People are just impatient to aren't going to an intersection of Batavia or Continental to cross. It just happens to be in the vicinity of this, and I can't explain why so many at this location. I mean, I haven't heard of it elsewhere. I haven't heard of multiple situations at any other intersection in town. This is one location that seems to be concentrated. I don't have an answer for why.
Okay, thanks. City
Administrator Coakley.
Thank you. You're hearing some of the concerns, certainly, but some of the frustrations are because it's a state route, and we have to follow the IDOT process. Even if the city wanted to come up with the money and pay for it directly, you still have to do the application, follow all the IDOT rules. It's got to be to their standards. I've learned a lot more about highway IDOT lighting in the last year. I even naively asked the question, why can't we just put a second ComEd pole on the other side and double the lighting? It's not allowed. Doesn't matter how big the street is. I've noticed a lot more lighting since this has come up. You drive down Route 56 with the divided the highway in some points. You've got one light on one side of the street of an intersection, the other side is completely dark. I don't know why those standards were set the way they are, but they've set them for some reason, and we have to follow their process if we want to do this at all. It's their rules, their street, and that's part of the prolonging here. If we get a grant, then of course we have to follow their funding them things, so we have to add on their requirements, and it's never fast, and you probably worked with IDOT. You've seen the city work with IDOT. It's a lengthy process, so we just need to look at that and then figure out how we want to go about this.
Just in response to that, we do have to follow an IDOT process, but there's been occasions where we've, prodded IDOT and been successful, and I think an example would be Continental and Meadow, where we sent letters and got a response in our favor, and they reacted. I think another example would be where we talked to IDOT about beautifying Butterfield Road when it was built, and we had a reaction from IDOT in our favor. So, IDOT is the difficult group to grapple with, but Amazon was able to get a reaction from IDOT and get them to react rather quickly. So I think it is, possible in different situations. You can't just, throw your cards on the table and say, well, that's IDOT. There's, nothing we can do. I think we got to continue to be persistent. Thank you.
Any other questions? A motion? Alderman Goodman?
Let's see. Yeah. Let's see. No, nothing.
Because the motion only says we're going to direct staff to research grant funding. It's up to us whether we want to take the time of staff to do the research of the grant funding. Hmm? So, we don't have a motion, so I guess this is not even going to. Stewart? Or Alderman Asher, I'm sorry.
I'd like to recommend City Council direct staff to research grant funding opportunities to design and construct street lighting improvements at the Route 59 intersection with Meadow Avenue and Continental Drive. Second.
Anyone, second?
Second.
Okay, there's a motion by Alderman Ashour and a second by Alderman Davalos. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
Okay, I think, do we need to have a,
I'm not sure what the vote was.
okay, we had 1, 2, 3 nays. 1, 2, 3, 4. Alderman. Go ahead, vote. Oh. Alderman Davalos?
Just a quick question. So you are still recommending this action as it says here?
Yeah, I just said to research grant funding opportunities, yes. I think street lighting isn't going to hurt here. I can't say that it would have made a difference and prevented those people from being killed or hit by a car, especially when you're crossing against a signal, but it's not going to, street lighting isn't going to hurt. I just want to, as part of this discussion, if the request comes up for Batavia Road, for instance, it should be there's a path across, there's plenty of traffic through there. Be aware that somebody else could get hit there, and that it's another $350,000 project that we're going to be maintaining for quite a long time. But I think investigating grant funding sources, there's probably a limited amount of them, and it wouldn't take long to figure out what their call for project timelines are and that kind of stuff. It wouldn't be difficult to come back and.
Thank you.
Maybe we should have a roll call, or I mean, can we have a hand raise, or what kind of
I
vote?
heard 3 nays and 4 ayes.
Okay, so therefore
If that
motion.
is not accurate, then we can do a show of hands.
A show of hands for all those in favor.
Correct.
Okay, 4, and then opposed? 3. Motion passes?
Correct.
Okay. All right. 15, continued discussion on the draft FY 2019 citywide work plan. Is that you? Community
Somebody. The
Mr.
guy-
Coakley.
The guy to your right.
Whatever your title is, Mr.
Thank you.
Coakley.
I'm sorry, I was still
Mhm.
contemplating the last motion.
Mhm.
Yes, as we promised, the citywide work plan project list is again on this agenda. I do want to point out, as noted in the summary, staff got together, realized my overzealous statement last week that we could go all the way to the end of the budget process, and getting your direction is not accurate. Certainly, the final vote could be taken then, but we're going to need clear direction on the prioritization, whether you agree, disagree, want to change some things out by March 5th. Certainly, if there's some changes, the council wishes to move something up, we'll have to look at it and assess what can be moved down to compensate so that we can still accomplish everything, and that will take a little more time. Then we can discuss everything with the council at the March 17th budget workshop with all the decision packages. The department staff is all there. Look at the work plan, the budget, and everything in total, so we can make sure we're making informed decisions and you have all the information you need. Aside from that, we're here to answer any questions. If there's questions about things that pertain to department heads who aren't here, we'll certainly get those to them, and we'll get back to you and report back on anything we can't answer tonight at next Monday's meeting. We will include this also on all the council agendas in addition to the committee up to that point. Thank you.
Okay, are there any questions at this time? Okay, Alderman Goodman, do you have your hand raised? Okay.
I guess my just sort of general observation about this is that this is a list of, council indicated priorities. And the staff presents their understanding of what our priorities are when they put this list together. And, you know, I feel one of the main roles of the city council is to set policy and to make the priorities and change them when staff presents us with information about not being able to accommodate all the various things that we've set are priorities. So even though they've presented this list, I feel like treating it like some sort of take it or leave it list is not the best way to approach this discussion. So that's just my general comment, and I will stop right there.
Okay. I actually thought the list was more for our benefit to see from staff where they are in the process of doing these items and how far along they've gotten with them, and to see which ones would be complete or accomplished before others. I didn't look at it as like saying to us, this is what we're going to do first, but we've given them the go ahead and do these things, and this is where we're at this time. I don't know, maybe I'm looking at it wrong. Any other comments? Alderman Davalos?
Yeah, I kind of think it's a combination of things. I think some of these things need to be drilled down. The details, for instance, I was in agreement last week when Alderman Goodman talked about the website being not very friendly to phones, and I'm frustrated with that a lot. But we did get some explanation of that from Assistant City Administrator White, that it's going to require a complete redesign of the website that will take months. There were some fixes that were made, I think, this last week. So for me, that was as an example, an educational opportunity to say, well, I would have put that at a 1, but there's a reason it can't be right now. And because I think the ERP is taking up a lot of time that's changing things. I think this is kind of, once that's over, I think a lot of things will change. I was talking to Alderman Barry about the streetscape, about the Route 56 streetscape, and I said to her, why is this a 2? I want it to be a 1. I mean, when is it ever going to? And she said, no, we're just about finished. Had the meeting. We just have to execute. We got to get the good weather. So I'm thinking that will get done when it gets done, whether it's a 1 or a 2. So I'm sort of thinking this is a general outline, and it's not set in stone. It's sort of the staff's best guess with their resources and time and where things are right now, that sometimes we may not know all the details unless we ask. But that things could still get moved around depending on funding, depending on time freeing up, depending on other things being completed, or the council saying all of a sudden we don't want to do that. So there's a lot of things that could happen. So I'm fairly satisfied with the list in my mind. I would move things around, but I think I've crossed out all my little changes through the last 24 hours as I've gotten more information about what's going on. So I think it's a nice place to start, and we certainly can continue to talk about it. So that's just my thought.
Assistant City Administrator White, you had a comment?
Yes, I wanted to follow up a little bit on the weekly report item. I did have, because the website has come up a few times in this discussion, I did have a conversation on last Tuesday with Civic Plus, which is our current website administrator for the city. We are eligible for a free upgrade. There is no cost to doing the redesign for the city website. That is in place for as long as we have a city website with Civic Plus. So I know one of the questions that came up last week was, are we going to lose that upgrade if we don't move on? And so there is no time constraint to that revision. The other part of the conversation with Civic Plus was looking at possible options to upgrade the platform or make it more mobile friendly without going through a full-blown redesign at this point and committing that time. Unfortunately, that isn't an option. Because of the way that our website is set up and the platform that it's currently on, there is no way to make it more mobile friendly without going through the full-blown redesign of the website. That is anticipated to take anywhere from 6 to 8 months based on their experience with other communities. That timeline can increase depending on the content. We have roughly 230 plus pages of content on our website currently that would have to be looked at and revised, some of which is probably a little outdated, some of which we may not need or decide that we want to simplify the navigation of the website. So all of those factors come into play. Even if there was a way to eliminate other items that are currently set as number 1 or number 2, I just want to make clear that in order for something like the website to be moved up, which is an effort that would require not only me to kind of lead it, but also every other department would have to have some participation in terms of updating the content and looking at the design of the website and figuring out layout and structure and how to navigate to and from all of the different areas of the website for the department information. We would have to have a significant number of items that impact every single department move from a top 1 or 2 tier priority in order to be able to move something like the website up. So I am 100% in agreement with everyone that has said our website needs some work. I will be the first to tell you that on a daily basis when we are going through the back-end administration of updating the website. It definitely, there's definitely lots of areas of improvement. We have, Alma and I, just this last week, worked on trying to move up the minutes and agendas in the navigation on the mobile site. So we rearranged it a little bit so that at least it comes up quicker in the list, so you're not scrolling through the navigation on a phone to get to the agenda and minutes. I know it's not ideal, and it is a priority. It's just with every other priority, and especially the ERP, it's just not going to be feasible to do it this year with the staff time, not just for administration, but all of the departments that would have to be involved with the content. So I just wanted to address some of those questions that came up at our last discussion of the website.
Mayor Brummel?
Just a couple of observations. One, this is our first attempt at a citywide work plan, so I applaud that attempt. It is something I think that will be valuable going forward. It is, in my understanding is that everything 1, 2, or 3 tier is something that the council has indicated as a priority. The staff's ranking of the first, second, or third tier is based on their understanding of the possibility of the successful completion of those particular items, as well as whether or not the completion of one item should be, superseded by the, completion of another. So it's an interpretation of policy in terms of the importance of things getting done. Everything I've heard so far, when someone has asked a question about why something is tier 1 or tier 2, the staff has been prepared with logical, rational reasons of why they've been ranked that way. The council is certainly free to disagree with that and to make a change, but it is an attempt to try to get a program that's comprehensive for what we're doing in the city and clearly identifies what the priorities are. It's an attempt at that by staff. They've done a pretty good job, I think. I'm with Alderman Berry and Alderman Davalos. It looks pretty good to me. But again, the council is free to take an item, to talk about it, and to change it because they think it deserves a different priority. So it's not cast in stone. It's not a take it or leave it idea. It's an attempt, again, to try to get a sensible, rational order to what we're approaching given the constraints that we have. So whenever there are questions, I encourage people to ask questions. Now we get some explanation of why, as much as we'd like to make our system more mobile friendly, it's a big thing. So it's maybe something that we can't take on right now. So again, I applaud staff for bringing this forward. I applaud the council people for looking at it carefully and asking questions. And if there are changes to be made, staff will be happy to make those dependent on the direction of the council.
Alderman Widener?
I just had a question about the website content and how often each department reviews their own website content that's on the site presently.
I would say the answer to that is it depends on what it is. Some of the like economic development things get updated, I think, fairly regularly just because of the nature of them posting updates to what's occurring. Some of the other areas of the website, unless there is a specific change, it's more of a reaction than a proactive effort of consistently updating the content. So things like the newsfeed get updated fairly regularly. Calendar events, things like that get updated pretty regularly from the different departments. But if it's something that's more of an ongoing long-term program or form or something that hasn't really changed, then those things are not proactively reviewed on a regular basis and updated. Just again, because of the lack of ability and time to dedicate to that. So it's done much more reactionary than we would like.
It seems like an annual review of a department's content on the website with the rate at which we travel in technology would be a reasonable goal for each department to at least, make sure one time a year that their information is up and accurate and timely. And that would cover your 230 pages. Basically, if they did that once a year, because basically if you're waiting for a 6 to 8 month period to update your website and find time to review 230 pages, you're sitting with a stale website for at least portions of a stale website until you gain that 6 to 8 months. And I just think that with all that we're commenting on with the website, I guess I'd just be interested to know from staff, and you don't have to answer it now, just what it would take to move that up to a different tier. Just because communication with our residents, I think, is a high priority. So I'd be interested in having that question answered. And then also with that, the possibility of the ERP, it seems like that's going to take up a lot of staff time, and I just wonder what would be the worst case scenario if you extended that time to complete the ERP by 6 or 8 months, and what that would buy in return as far as being able to pull and adjust Tier 3 to Tier 1 or Tier 2 or wherever the discussion leads us with the different projects. I think we've seen a strong preference for, a solar project or solar, looking into that technology from the council, and I see 2 projects down at Tier 3, and I think we haven't really addressed Tier 3. Tier 3, you could stay at Tier 3 for 2 or 3 years because it doesn't necessarily guarantee that the following year it's going to move up from Tier 3 to Tier 2. It could remain at Tier 3 or eventually fall off too if it was not a good project. So I guess those are my comments about the work plan. The other thing too is I guess it wasn't all in my comments. The other, how much, we have a strong but mighty staff, but we're shorthanded in a lot of areas as our community grows, and given a full-time staff allotment of, I think it's 2,080 hours a year without vacations is what amount of staff time you would have to give to a project. How does that equate to these different projects? How much staff time does it take to do these Tier 1 projects? How much staff time does it take to do, and I know that's probably going to be an estimate, but it would be interesting to know what amount of staff allocations is required in order to complete those projects. So those are my comments. Thanks.
Administrator Coakley?
A couple of thoughts. It's late, so I'll try to just be focused and uncharacteristically brief. Just a response to just one of the last things Alderman Widener was asking. We can do that, certainly look at some of the staff time. I want to remind everybody, though, that the 2080 divided up for the average employee, it's not quite as relatable to the salaried employees as it is for the hourly ones, but Using that as a factor so we have a standard benchmark. Please keep in mind, everyone, that the projects we're prioritizing and the amount of time we're looking at there does not include the core basic functions. For example, administration, a lot of my time is involved in reviewing minutes, working on with staff on agenda packets, sitting in meetings for different things, not working on a specific project, the same at different levels as it goes through for Public Works, for Christina, for Police Chief Ron, Natalia, et cetera, et cetera. So it's what we're internally calling, it's not the best term, but kind of the flexible time that's there for special projects on top of or in with all the core responsibilities. That takes up across an average year X. Maybe it's 1,500, maybe it's 1,800, maybe it's 2,000 in some positions. But there's so much extra time that can be allotted to special projects that's not already allocated to that base work. The second thing, I want to just bring it to a higher level. All this work results from your staff, which is using their expertise, and we think your direction through the years, through the current plans, through the current direction, and trying to evaluate what needs to move forward first. And we've listed out the criteria we're showing are all our work. You're asking some questions. We'll get back with those answers. Those are fair. Certainly, this is not locked in stone. This is not even intended to be here's what staff's going to do, period. That's not our role. It's yours, absolutely, to make that direction. We think we're interpreting that correctly, but if we're not, or if the council as a whole, majority, whatever the majority vote wants to be, we can certainly redirect those. We just need enough time to assess what needs to move to make the capacity. Long-term, as I said last week, we need to get free from some of these projects and start looking at we'll do a decision package, talk to you about it in the coming year, a staffing, a services, and a facilities study. We've been talking piecemeal about each one internally, not some we brought to you yet, but services should drive staffing and the services drive the equipment, the facilities that we need. You need to look at all those together if we're going to be looking at a wholesale citywide program. But wherever the council wants to make change in this, I'll echo what the mayor said, absolutely. It's your city. You're elected to represent the community. We work for you. That's where you set the policy direction. It's our job, though, to point out the difficulties, the capacity constraints that we have, and make sure that we're all having that dialogue together. That's why we keep bringing this to you to discuss it, and then ultimately we need a vote to give us a clear direction what everybody wants to do collectively. Thank you.
Any other comments? Okay, that was informational only. On to 16, informational update on Public Works Department work plan. Is that Phil?
Okay.
16, 17, and 18 are just informational items. If anybody's got any comments or questions about them, I'd be happy to field those, but otherwise they're just kind of an FYI. I've no presentation involved in any of these items.
Okay. Any questions? This would be about the work plan for Public Works, the decision packages for Public Works, and the service levels and staffing study recommendation also for Public Works. Alderman Goodman?
I guess one thing, I've gotten some resident questions about the Mack Road path improvements, and my understanding, and all it really says here is it's on hold because of the application for the bridge. If there are residents that want to keep abreast of this situation and the plans, how can they get more information about when this may come back, how much of the plans might change? Have the bridge applications that have gone in basically said the exact same thing, that the path would be on the north side of the road and the people's driveways where they don't want it and all that?
Christine, you want to?
We have applied for funding, assuming that the path will be on the north side. In terms of contacts with residents, I've emailed and also sent out notification of the fact that the project is on hold until we figure out the bridge funding. I have everyone's, at least the residents on the north side of Mac, east of 59, I have everyone's email addresses as well as phone numbers. And at the meeting that we had, I asked them if they had any questions to reach out to me. I have met with a couple of the residents who still have the concerns about the path on the north side, but I did tell them that until we get into really preliminary engineering drawings, we don't know exactly where that path will lie, and as well as how much right-of-way the city has. So we were having our consultant investigate the survey on their property for that aspect of it. So I can update them as we get more information. I would first just rather figure out if we're going to get the funding so I can give them an actual timeline, because right now I don't have any indication.
Okay, do we have any idea when we'll hear about the funding range possible? Because it just says fiscal year 19, which is quite a year and a half from now.
I think the STP bridge funding, I believe, is done on a quarterly basis, so I believe that would be March. Then we should
Okay, so
find
we
out.
may have more information soon. Thanks, that's all I need.
Okay. Nothing else at this time? Okay, we have nothing under miscellaneous, no closed sessions, and all we need is a motion to adjourn. Someone, please?
I make a motion to adjourn.
Motion by Alderman Davalos and a second by Alderman Wilson, was that? Oh, no? Oh, okay.
Can I second my own motion?
Okay, good. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, opposed? Yay, we're adjourned. Okay. Thank you, everyone.